Just like how the sages couldn't even break through the defense of the longevity monument, which was a pseudo-divine artifact. It was needless to say how powerful the heaven and earth diagram was, with it being a true divine artifact. Although it wasn't a defensive divine artifact, the power of a tier 10 mage wouldn't be enough to cause any damage to it. Thus it was a given that they felt that Lin Ming's current move was childish. After all, the current Lin Ming was only a tier 10. Let alone causing any damage in the heaven and earth diagram. It was even difficult for him to destroy anything that was created out of thin air in the diagram. However, Lin Ming had considered more than what the voices thought. After all, this was not the first time Lin Ming had gone through the trials to a god-tier inheritance. The trials within were custom-made. For example, since Lin Ming's current strength was tier 10, the trial would also be a tier 10 trial. This was also the wisdom of the god-tier experts. Only by doing it this way would one be able to find the best inheritor. If the rules were fixed and they didn't measure one's abilities according to one's tier, they might miss out on the best inheritor. Besides, god-tier experts had this ability to still have a similar inheritance after hundreds of thousands of years. Buzz! Suddenly, a black door appeared in front of Lin Ming. Lin Ming entered without thinking, because he had sensed instant danger. He trusted his instincts. Buzz! As Lin Ming entered, the black hole closed. Behind him, two figures were unable to follow him in. They were furious. They didn't expect Lin Ming to really be able to find and enter the door. They didn't want to appear so early, but they didn't expect Lin Ming to slip away right under their noses. And now, they couldn't find any trace of Lin Ming at all. Just now they were about to catch up to Lin Ming, but they were blocked by a force. Let's attack together. The two of them looked at each other. They remembered that Lin Ming's attack had caused this black hole to appear. Get lost. As they attacked, a fierce shout appeared. With this, the two of them were expelled from the heaven and earth diagram. Damn it! This woman dares to treat us like this. When I become the master of the diagram in the future, I will have her serve me well. The two figures shouted in exasperation. We'll have to use that method. After all, we can't just watch him succeed right in front of our eyes. The other figure said okay. The two of them reached a consensus once again because of Lin Ming. At this moment, the scene in front of Lin Ming changed. Congratulations, you have entered the first trial. Your strength has been recognized. Please move forward and go through the first trial. A voice said continuously. Lin Ming lowered his head and took large strides forward. So, he had only just reached the first trial? Then did it mean that everything that happened just now was fake? However, Lin Ming believed that all of this couldn't be so simple. That figure just now couldn't be fake, because a fake couldn't possibly possess such power. The feeling of him being lifted just now couldn't be fake too. Furthermore, someone at the half-step god tier couldn't possibly be fake either. This meant that whatever the voice said was fake. The first trial is beginning. Please extend your hands. As Lin Ming moved forward, the voice continued to appear. A brush appeared in Lin Ming's hand. Lin Ming knew that this brush was the heaven and earth brush. Please begin drawing. The voice continued. Drawing? Lin Ming frowned. He didn't expect that there would be such a trial. Drawing? Lin Ming had never had any talent in drawing. Moreover, Lin Ming didn't know what to draw. Are there any requirements? Lin Ming asked. No voice answered Lin Ming. Lin Ming knew that this meant that there were no requirements. Otherwise, the voice would have stated the additional requirements. System, hurry up and give me some help, Lin Ming muttered in his heart. Ding! Detected that the host's drawing talent is low. The system will give the host the ability to duplicate. As if it had heard Lin Ming's thoughts, the system gave Lin Ming the ability to duplicate. In other words, Lin Ming could now draw everything that he had ever laid eyes upon with no error in any detail. This was the ability to duplicate. However, Lin Ming was still displeased that the system said that his drawing talent was low. After all, it wasn't that his drawing talent was low, but that he didn't have any drawing talent at all. He was good at fighting, but if one were to test his abilities in music, chess, calligraphy, and drawing, he was an absolute zero. Duplicate? Suddenly, Lin Ming thought of something. The system had duplicated the world-class spirit gathering array of this world. Now, wouldn't it be enough for him to just duplicate the duplicated version of the world-class spirit gathering array into the heaven and earth diagram? Since the spirit gathering array was world-class, he believed that even the heaven and earth diagram, which was a divine artifact, couldn't find fault with it. He did as he thought. Lin Ming picked up the heaven and earth brush, and started duplicating the world-class spirit gathering array that the system had duplicated into the heaven and earth diagram. Of course, this required time. However, Lin Ming didn't care about the passing of time. Lin Ming continued to draw meticulously. It was a long sense of time. After all, even an extremely tiny symbol on a world-class spirit gathering array was extremely difficult to draw. As time passed, beads of sweat began to appear on Lin Ming's head. Even though Lin Ming possessed the ability to duplicate, he still felt that it was extremely difficult. However, as Lin Ming continued to draw, he gained new understandings and new feelings. After all, he was duplicating a world-class spirit gathering array. Even with just this array alone, it could produce a Sage tier expert. So many arrays had evolved from the world-class spirit gathering array. He's actually drawing a world-class spirit gathering array. After such a long time, Lin Ming had already carved more than half of the world-class spirit gathering array. Initially, the owner of the voice didn't know what Lin Ming was doing. The speed at which he was drawing was so slow that he even felt a hint of disdain. And now, Lin Ming had drawn more than half of the world-class spirit gathering array. The owner of the voice was thus conquered. A person who possessed such an ability didn't seem like a tier 10 mage at all. Or rather, this wasn't something a tier 10 mage could do. It could even be said without any exaggeration that even if all the sages of the two worlds were added up together, there would not be more than 2 who possessed such an ability. This was because to draw the world-class spirit gathering array, not only would one need endless magical energy, one would also need a powerful spiritual consciousness to support oneself. The most crucial point was that one needed to be 100% correct in the process. One wasn't allowed any room for mistakes, even if the mistakes were invisible to the naked eye. As long as any mistakes were made, all previous efforts would be wasted. On top of that, the complexity of the world-class spirit gathering array wasn't something that could be imagined. If one imagined it to be a level of complexity, the true complexity would be dozens of folds more complicated than one's imagination. As time passed, Lin Ming could no longer hold on. The high-intensity drawing made it difficult for Lin Ming to breathe. Lin Ming's beads of sweat evaporated from his face. Because if any beads of sweat landed on the drawing, it would cause the world-class spirit gathering array to directly collapse. There were too many things that one had to pay attention to when carving a world-class spirit gathering array. The current Lin Ming could already feel his vision turning black. And now, the drawing had reached its most critical moment. Thus, Lin Ming didn't dare to make any mistakes. Lin Ming's tears were about to come out. Time continued to pass. The world-class spirit gathering array was on the verge of being completed. The owner of the voice in the deepest depths was looking forward to it extremely. If Lin Ming could complete the drawing, the bullshit trials following this could all just be thrown into the garbage. He could even draw the world-class spirit gathering array. What other trial could possibly challenge him? At this moment, Lin Ming was forcefully controlling his trembling arm, because he couldn't afford to make a single mistake. Buzz! Suddenly, Lin Ming's heart exploded with an extremely strong life force that nourished Lin Ming's body. All of Lin Ming's fatigue disappeared. Just now, Lin Ming hadn't dared to mobilize any life force, because he was worried that something would happen. Now that the Heart of the World Tree had voluntarily given him the life force, these worries were unnecessary. Now that Lin Ming's body was once again filled with energy, the process of drawing the remaining spirit gathering array became extremely simple. Of course, such a thing could only happen to Lin Ming, who had the ability to duplicate and was full of energy. This fellow actually has the Heart of the World Tree. Just now, the owner of the voice had sensed the burst of power from the source of life. This made her feel a little incredulous. After all, the Heart of the World Tree was on a completely different level with a tier 10 mage. Even a Sage tier powerhouse would only be fertilizer in front of the Heart of the World Tree. However, not only did Lin Ming have 2 divine artifacts and 1 pseudo-divine artifact, but he had also obtained 2 god-tier inheritances and 16 types of mutated seeds of flame, as well as many world-class secrets. With this, it was not surprising that Lin Ming had the source of life. Besides, Lin Ming could draw a world-class spirit gathering array. He was a person who created miracles, so it wasn't surprising that he had so many miracles. Buzz! Suddenly, a storm of spirit energy appeared. Lin Ming's skin was directly cut open by the magic elements. Black Tortoise's reaction was extremely fast. Lin Ming's body was instantly protected. At this moment, Lin Ming had finished drawing his world-class spirit gathering array. Although the spirit gathering array had been drawn with the heaven and earth brush in the heaven and earth diagram, it still truly existed. Now that the world-class spirit gathering array had been completely drawn, the storm of the magic elements formed had a great lethality. After all, things will develop in the opposite direction when they become extreme. Now that the concentration of magic elements had reached its peak, they could not be absorbed and thus formed a storm. Such destructive power was something that even a Tier 10 expert would not be able to resist. Even with the toughness of Lin Ming's physical body, blood had appeared on his skin in an instant. If it was anyone else, they would probably have been torn into pieces. He actually succeeded in drawing a world-class spirit gathering array. Although the owner of the voice had been watching Lin Ming draw the world-class spirit gathering array, she still found it hard to believe even though Lin Ming had now completed the drawing. This is a world-class spirit gathering array that only a god-tier powerhouse could create. Even a sage couldn't draw it. Master, I'll decide for you today. The rest of the trials aren't necessary. After all, this guy has already obtained 2 god-tier inheritances. There shouldn't be any need for our trials anymore. Plus, we've already made him go through 1 trial, and he has completed the drawing of the world-class spirit gathering array. This is exactly the kind of master that the heaven and earth diagram needs. This voice began muttering to herself after Lin Ming finished his drawing. You're very good. Suddenly, a beautiful figure appeared beside Lin Ming. You're very good. This beautiful figure repeated what she had just said. You are the artifact spirit of the heaven and earth diagram? Lin Ming asked. Yes, this beautiful figure nodded. There's no need for you to go through the rest of the trials, the beautiful figure said. You've passed the trial. I'm the vermilion bird. From now on, you'll be my master. The beautiful figure lowered her head and said, I'm willing to acknowledge Lin Ming as my master and serve him for all eternity. The vermilion bird continued with her head lowered. As the vermilion bird spoke, Lin Ming's body was surrounded by a wave of energy. Ha ha ha, excellent. A figure appeared beside Lin Ming. Senior diagram spirit, Lin Ming hurriedly bowed. This diagram spirit looked exactly the same as the diagram spirit from earlier, but the feeling he gave Lin Ming was completely different. The one from earlier? Lin Ming asked. They're just 2 of my descendants. No matter what, they're pretty good, the diagram spirit said with a smile. Those 2 can merge into 1. With such a cultivation method, if the path wasn't shattered, they might be able to become god-tier experts by themselves. The diagram spirit continued. Although he had never allowed the 2 to obtain the inheritance, deep in his heart, he still acknowledged their abilities. And now, you were able to make the vermilion bird acknowledge you as her master just by passing the first trial. To think that you were able to draw a world-class spirit gathering array. You're really not bad at all. The diagram spirit looked at Lin Ming and laughed loudly. I never thought that all our inheritances would be given to you alone. In the future, I'm afraid that none of us will be able to catch up to your achievements. The diagram spirit spoke seriously. I wouldn't dare. Lin Ming lowered his head. He was still a long way off from becoming a god-tier expert. There's no need to be in a hurry to reject. Now that the vermilion bird has acknowledged you as her master, why aren't you signing the contract with her? After all, up until now, only you have had such an opportunity. The diagram spirit smiled and said, Yes. Lin Ming nodded and began the contract signing ceremony with the vermilion bird. Din! After Lin Ming signed the contract was now effective. Lin Ming had become the master of the heaven and earth diagram. You are the juncture for us breakthrough to the god tier. Since those 2 old men have already given the inheritance to you, I won't be stingy. The diagram spirit looked at Lin Ming and said, Yes, senior. Lin Ming lowered his head and said, he had a premonition that the inheritance of the diagram spirit was his chance to break through to the sage tier. After receiving the inheritance of the diagram spirit, Lin Ming broke through to the sage tier. With the foundation he would have no problems when he broke through to the god tier. At least, the so-called bottleneck wouldn't appear. In the future, he will be your master. You have to serve him well. Oh right, if you have the chance, please remember to resurrect us. The diagram spirit looked at Lin Ming and said seriously. Resurrect you? Hearing this, Lin Ming somewhat understood why they would put so much effort into nurturing him. It was all because they wanted to be resurrected and return to the world. After all, no one would want to leave this world completely. That's right. When you reach the god tier, you'll have the ability to do so. We will inject a wisp of our souls into your body before we disappear, so when you reach the god tier, you'll be able to reconstruct our bodies. Since we are at the god tier anyway, we have our ways to preserve our souls. When you have enough power, you'll be able to resurrect us, the diagram spirit explained to Lin Ming. I understand. Lin Ming nodded. The moment I reach the god tier, the first thing I will do is to resurrect seniors, Lin Ming promised. Okay, I believe that their judgment will not be wrong, the diagram spirit also nodded. Since the previous two god tier experts had tested Lin Ming, there was nothing for him to say anymore. After all, the demon god and the god of fire were famous. Back then, even among the god tier experts, they were the leaders. Especially the demon god, who led the divine clan to battle. Are you ready to obtain the inheritance? The diagram spirit asked. Yes, I'm ready, Lin Ming nodded. Although he had already received two god tier inheritances, Lin Ming was still extremely excited. After all, every god tier inheritance brought him different training and evolutionary attainments. Let me say this first. My inheritance will be much more painful than theirs. To obtain my inheritance, you'll have to be skinned, your tendons have to be pulled out, and your blood may even be drained. The diagram spirit smiled and said, I understand. How can a god tier inheritance be so easily obtained? Lin Ming nodded. He was the one who understood the most about the pain that a god tier inheritance brought. That being said, after the inheritance process ended, the benefits it brought to him were unimaginable. Just simply unimaginable. If one wanted to wear the crown, one must bear a heavy burden. Such was the sentence that best described what it took to obtain a god tier inheritance. All right, then it's time to begin. The diagram spirit nodded. He could see that Lin Ming was a person with a tenacious character. Lin Ming was neither servile nor overbearing, and he had a very strong foundation. Yes, Lin Ming nodded. Following Lin Ming's nod, a wave of power surrounded Lin Ming. Lin Ming opened his mouth but couldn't make a sound, because all the blood in Lin Ming's body had evaporated at this moment. Even though Lin Ming had imagined the pain he would have to endure, when he truly experienced it, it was still quite unbearable. Lin Ming's consciousness was blurred at this moment. In the previous two wines, Lin Ming could still maintain the last bit of his consciousness. But this time, it was difficult for him to maintain his clarity. Go! A burst of power erupted from the diagram spirit's hand. Blood appeared in the diagram spirit's hand. Even a single drop of the blood could crush the chest of a sage tier expert. This was god tier blood. As he controlled it, the god tier blood began to boil. At the same time, the god tier blood began to surge as well. Every single drop of blood contained an entire world. God tier experts had long since surpassed the scope of this world. Even a single drop of blood of a god tier expert contained a mysterious and unfathomable power. I'm really afraid that this kid won't be able to endure it. This is the only fellow who has been able to break through the barrier for over 100,000 years, the diagram spirit muttered to himself. He was really afraid that Lin Ming wouldn't be able to endure this kind of pain. After all, even a sage tier expert wouldn't be able to withstand the fusion of the god tier blood. Master, please be gentle. At this moment, the vermilion bird beside the diagram spirit spoke up. Tisk tisk, you're so loyal to him already. The diagram spirit smiled. Don't worry. I can't bear to let this kid disappear just like that. Otherwise, the demon god and the god of fire will probably come alive from the dead to beat me up, the diagram spirit spoke. The inheritance of the two had been handed over to Lin Ming, and Lin Ming had perfectly accepted the inheritance. If he made a mistake and killed Lin Ming, wouldn't those two people come alive because of the anger? Yes, master, the vermilion bird nodded. She knew that she had worried too much. However, it will be too difficult for him to bear the god tier blood, the diagram spirit sighed and said. Dung! Suddenly, the right side of Lin Ming's heart began to beat crazily. With this, Lin Ming, who had already lost consciousness, once again regained clarity. Lin Ming exhaled loudly. This feeling was too terrifying. However, there was still no blood in Lin Ming's body. What made him finally regain consciousness was the surging life force in his body. Oh right, doesn't he have the heart of the world tree? This kid has had quite a sum of fortuitous encounters. To think that a tier 10 mage has 3 god tier inheritances, as well as the heart of the world tree. However, if it wasn't for his solid foundation, I'm afraid that he wouldn't be able to withstand my inheritance. The diagram spirit stretched out his hand. The heart of the world tree floated out, from Lin Ming's body to the front of the diagram spirit. Go! The diagram spirit spoke. The god tier blood surged and entered the heart of the world tree. The heart of the world tree began to absorb crazily. At this moment, without the support of a life force from the world tree's heart, Lin Ming was on the ground. He couldn't even breathe. It was as if he had fallen into an endless abyss. Lin Ming! Lin Ming! Suddenly, Lin Ming heard two shouts. Lin Ming tried his best to open his eyes. He was surprised to find that the shouts were from the demon god and the god of fire. The two of them were sitting in front of Lin Ming. Lin Ming had his eyes wide open in disbelief. Did you obtain the diagram spirit's inheritance? The demon god asked with a smile. Haha, this kid is quite good. He's found someone else to accompany us. The voice of the god of fire sounded very happy as well. It seems that the god of fire and the demon god hadn't completely disappeared but had instead been together the whole time. That guy is quite ruthless. To think he made Lin Ming's consciousness enter the deepest layer, the demon god said. Although he's called the diagram spirit, everyone knows that he's the most ruthless, the god of fire said helplessly. It can't be helped since it's mainly because his cultivation method is very different. The demon god shook his head and said, although the diagram spirit's methods were ruthless, his heart was upright. Otherwise, the style of the drawing wouldn't have been so upright. After all, one's appearance reflects one's mind. Such was the logic even at the diagram spirit's tier, and thus his drawings that reflected his uprightness. That being said, kid, if you can obtain the inheritance of the diagram spirit, it can be considered heaven ascending luck. The benefits you will obtain will also be extremely great. The demon god looked at Lin Ming and said, I'm afraid he will be in great danger though. His consciousness is already forced to the deepest layer, the god of fire said worriedly. It's fine. Don't we still have our trump cards? The demon god smiled and said, are we going to use our trump cards on Lin Ming now? The god of fire frowned. If he breaks through to the god tier right after he reaches the sage tier, I'm afraid. The god of fire couldn't help but voice his worries. Right now, they indeed had trump cards that were all prepared for Lin Ming. Although they only had a sliver of their souls left, they could still use their trump cards. After all, they were at the god tier. Even after hundreds of thousands of years, they could still perfectly display their methods. It doesn't matter, we have more anyway, the demon god smiled and said. Right now, the heart of the world tree in Lin Ming's body has been removed by the diagram spirit. We need to stabilize his body so that his consciousness can return. The demon god said, go. The demon god ordered. Gandalf. The demon god's soul spoke. As the demon god spoke, the spirit pool and lightning pool at the two ends in the stupa started to fuse. This fusion happened in an instant. Lin Ming was not the master of the stupa and not the demon god. If Lin Ming was conscious, Gandalf would naturally put Lin Ming's orders in first place, but now, Lin Ming had entered a deep coma. Even his consciousness had entered the deepest layer. In addition, the spirit pool and lightning pool didn't exist in the stupa in the beginning. The demon god had used extensive methods to move them in back then. Thus, they could be considered to be owned by the demon god. In addition to the fact that the demon god was the previous owner of the stupa, thus now that Lin Ming was in such a situation, Gandalf chose to obey the demon god's words. This was also because Gandalf knew that the demon god would not harm Lin Ming. He would only do things that were beneficial to Lin Ming at this time. After all, the current Gandalf did not want a new owner. No one could pass all the trials as Lin Ming did anyway. Fuse! The demon god said coldly. The lightning pool and the spirit pool merged. The spirit energy in both pools was at the same level as the spirit energy of a god-tier expert. After all, the magic elements in the spirit pool were created by the death of a god-tier expert died. Such was the same for the lightning pool. The two pools merged and instantly fused into Lin Ming's body. The means of the demon god? At this moment, Lin Ming's body suddenly shone brightly. The diagram spirit could tell that the demon god had made his move. This was the means of the demon god. Lin Ming's consciousness instantly returned to his body. Oh! The thunder power of the lightning pool could be said to be terrifying. It was even more so with the spirit pool. Now that the two had become one and were instantly absorbed by Lin Ming, with a buzz, Lin Ming's body was surrounded by powerful thunder power. Tusk tusk, to think that the demon god is so willing to spend all his capital, using his trump card at a time like this. If I knew you were so willing to make a move, I wouldn't have to be so careful just now. It was so tiring, the diagram spirit smiled and said. But since you've already done something like this, I can't let your precious disciple suffer any damage either. The diagram spirit's power exploded at his fingertips. All the blood that dripped from his fingertips merged into the heart of the world tree. Go! With a gentle tap of the diagram spirit's finger, the heart of the world tree returned to Lin Ming's body. At this moment, the lightning pool and the spirit pool were merged into one and had entered Lin Ming's body. The heart of the world tree had also returned to Lin Ming's body. Erg! Lin Ming's eyes suddenly flew open. Who? Lin Ming let out a deep breath. Oh! Lin Ming felt an endless amount of power violently erupt from his body. Oh! He screamed again. There was an extremely strong power in his body that he couldn't release. If this continued, Lin Ming's body would explode no matter how strong it was. Diagram spirit. Suddenly, a voice appeared beside the diagram spirit's ear. Okay. You don't have to say anything. I know, the diagram spirit smiled. Kid, I'll give you another surprise, the diagram spirit said as he pointed at Lin Ming. Hua! Another meridian suddenly appeared in Lin Ming's body. Of course, the pain of creating a meridian out of thin air almost made Lin Ming faint again. If it wasn't that Lin Ming was accustomed to enduring this kind of pain, he would have really lost consciousness. Buzz! In Lin Ming's body, all the thunder power and the spirit pool's magic elements that had just fused and could not be released entered the meridian that Lin Ming had just opened up. Boom! The thunder magic elements around Lin Ming's body merged into his body with great speed. The diagram spirit had created another magic element in Lin Ming's body at this moment. It was thunder magic. The thunder element that had finally found a vent made Lin Ming's magic tier raise crazily. Tier 1 Thunder Mage. Tier 2 Thunder Mage. Tier 3 Tier 10 Thunder Mage. The energy had helped him break through to become a Tier 10 Thunder Mage, but it didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Stabilize your strength and stabilize your tier. Don't make another breakthrough. Store the remaining power in every cell of your body. At this moment, as he was about to make another breakthrough, the diagram spirit's voice sounded in Lin Ming's ears. Even without the diagram spirit's words, Lin Ming wouldn't choose to make a breakthrough right now. Lin Ming didn't want to break through to the sage tier while he was not in his best state. Even though his foundation allowed him to do so, Lin Ming still wanted to take things one step at a time. If he advanced too much all at once, it would be extremely easy for him to fall in the future. Furthermore, Lin Ming had just obtained thunder magic. If he directly ascended to become a sage tier expert now, he might not be able to control some things. Don't break through any of your other elements as well. At this moment, the diagram spirit spoke again. Make your energy reach the peak of the sage tier, but maintain your tier at tier 10. The diagram spirit continued. How do I do that? The tier of one's cultivation represented one's strength. Such was obvious. But now, the diagram spirit had asked him to maintain his tier, but make his strength reach the peak of the sage tier. This sounded absurd to him. It was like wanting to fill a 10L water tank with 100L of water. Only if the water tank was upgraded to be able to hold 100L of water would there be a way to do so. Lin Ming's strength had now indeed exceeded that of a normal tier 10 mage, but he was more like a 70L water tank. Although he was far more than a 10L water tank, he definitely did not reach 100L. This was the biggest problem, and also what made it impossible for him to achieve what the diagram spirit had said. You brat, aren't you too fixed in your assumptions? The diagram spirit looked at Lin Ming and said, Do you know how to break through to the god tier? The diagram spirit asked. Senior demon god told me that I can use dark magic to do that. Lin Ming thought of the demon god's words and said, Then do you know why the demon god opened up another magic element for you? The diagram spirit asked again. Isn't it because by using dark magic to break through to the god tier, the remaining god tier experts won't be able to sense me? At this moment, Lin Ming was a little confused by the diagram spirit's words. That's not the case. With your current foundation, you can definitely reach the god tier and you're fated to do so. So, when you break through to the peak of the sage tier, the surviving god tier experts will definitely find you, the diagram spirit began to explain to Lin Ming. As for the few of us old men, we're only a sliver of our souls, we can't protect you at all. You have quite a few divine artifacts on you, but even though they have god tier power, you are unable to completely control them. When the time comes, you will definitely die. Now, the path that we have prepared for you is to make you have sage tier strength at tier 10. When you advance past tier 10, you will then have god tier strength. And when you reach the god tier, even if they find you and attack you, they won't be able to do anything to you, the diagram spirit explained in detail. This is the reason why the demon god opened up a second magic element in you. With this, The diagram spirit had explained everything clearly. I understand your intentions, Lin Ming said. He now understood how much the demon god and the others meant well for him. But Lin Ming took a deep breath. He also understood how he would be able to have the strength at the peak of the Sage tier at tier 10. That was to open up the power of all magic elements within him. You have to wait until you have opened up all the elements in your body, and advanced all of them to the peak of tier 10. Then fuse the different elements and you will thus have power at the peak of the Sage tier. Fuse all the different elements? Hearing this, Lin Ming frowned. That's right, the diagram spirit nodded. We call it the chaos element, but up until now, no one has walked this path. However, right now, this is the only path that you can take, the diagram spirit said. Even back then, when the path of God tier still existed, no one had been able to walk this path. You'll have to rely on yourself to open up the other magic elements, the diagram spirit continued. It would be easier for you if you could continue obtaining the other God tier inheritances, the diagram spirit said to Lin Ming. The demon god is quite knowledgeable, we'll tell you everything we know. If there are other God tier inheritances, I believe you'll be able to obtain them. It won't be difficult for you. Also, don't worry. We, the deceased God tier experts, won't reveal any secrets because we hate them to the bone. The diagram spirit said coldly. They had been buried alive by the survivors. And those hateful God tier survivors were afraid that they would be taken revenge on, thus they had blocked the path to becoming a God tier. Done. At this moment, Lin Ming's heartbeat suddenly sped up. First, fuse the blood in the world tree's heart. You're safe here. After the diagram spirit finished saying this, he entered Lin Ming's body. He naturally would not attack Lin Ming. Instead, she entered the deepest part of Lin Ming's consciousness. The demon god and the god of fire were both here. The two of you, quickly tell me what you know. Once I'm done, I'll come to accompany you, the diagram spirit said to the demon god and the god of fire. Do you miss us that much? You have been trapped inside the drawing for so long though, don't you want to go out and take a look before coming back to accompany us? Now that the process of the inheritance had ended, the diagram spirit had some time to go take a look at the outside world. Just like how the demon god had wandered around for some time and thus discovered the god tier underworld great elder, who was about to awaken. I've endured this for more than 100,000 years. Now, not only am I not alone, I can even see hope. With this kid's growth rate, he should be able to reach that tier in at most 1,000 years, the diagram spirit said. What was 1,000 years compared to 100,000 years? Haha, you're really good at calculations. However, your calculations are still a bit off. I can tell you very confidently that with this kid's growth rate, he's going to take at most 100 years. He might even reach that tier in a few decades. The demon god knew Lin Ming the best. After all, Lin Ming had obtained his inheritance before he had reached tier 7. Are you serious? After the diagram spirit heard the demon god's words, he took a while to process them before asking. You know me, I won't lie to fools, the demon god said. What's there to go out and see then? It's only a few decades. It's not even enough time for me to take a nap, the diagram spirit said. Hurry up and tell me everything you know. I'll tell Lin Ming so that he can advance as soon as possible. The diagram spirit couldn't wait any longer. All right, all right, all right. Look at your temper, it hasn't changed at all. The demon god and god of fire laughed loudly. The emperor is in the heavenly palace, and the heavenly palace is high up in the sky above the above-ground world. The demon god was the first to speak, informing Lin Ming of the position of a god-tier expert's inheritance. Now, they were the ones who wanted Lin Ming to quickly reach the god tier. Lin Ming had already obtained 3 god tier inheritances. His chances of success would be very high if he were to go for another god tier inheritance. They were in Lin Ming's body anyway. Although they were only remnants of their souls, the abilities they had were enough to help Lin Ming. In addition, with Lin Ming's strength and foundation, it was completely enough. One had to know that they were all trial designers, and now all of them had admitted that Lin Ming was the only person who could break through to the god tier in these past 100,000 years. Now, the only thing that would allow Lin Ming to obtain greater power with speed was the god tier inheritances. Not only would the god tier inheritance allow Lin Ming to obtain greater power, but they would also make Lin Ming's foundation stronger and stronger. The inheritance of a god tier expert was something that no sage alive could obtain. As the saying went, all god tier inheritances had intelligence. They would tweak the difficulties of the trials to be on par with the trial taker's strength. If one was at the sage tier, one would have to pass the sage tier trial. even though it was already considered rare to become a sage tier expert given the scarcity of sages in both worlds, but none of them had obtained the recognition of a god tier inheritance. It wasn't as if no one had entered a god tier inheritance during the long period, but none had succeeded. The Victory Buddha is within Mountain Huiduo at the end of the river, on a cliff. The god of fire spoke at this moment. If he can obtain the inheritance of the Victory Buddha, it would be a great fortune. The god of fire continued. Back then, the Victory Buddha was quite famous. Although he was not a leader, his combat strength could be ranked in the top 3. I also know where Pangu, the most powerful existence back then, is. The demon god spoke, unwilling to be outdone. The location of Pangu's inheritance? Upon hearing the demon god's words, the diagram spirit and the god of fire both exclaimed in astonishment. They had no words to refute the demon god's mention of Pangu being the most powerful god tier expert, because deep down, they also agreed with this matter. Even among god tier experts, Pangu's combat strength could be said to be terrifying. Moreover, it was Pangu who had suggested that there were higher tiers above the god tier. It was also Pangu who suggested that the world was restricting them. If they broke through the restriction, they would be able to reach higher tiers. However, as time passed, Pangu disappeared. It was only during the final battle that Pangu had appeared. At that time, Pangu was already in existence with even greater powers. However, he was still unable to break through the restrictions of the world. In the end, he was ambushed by 7 god-tier experts, and neither his body nor his soul was left. They did not expect that Pangu had an inheritance as well. They still remembered the words that Pangu had said before he was killed. If I can have another 10,000 years, I will definitely break through the limits of this world and reach that tier. Thinking of those words, they still vibrated their souls till now. What courage! To fight against the heavens. It was beyond the imagination of many people. I am invincible in the human world. Who else could I fight against if not the heavens? Only Pangu thought that way. And now, they had been trapped for hundreds of thousands of years, only a wisp of their souls in such a narrow space. They were lamenting how stupid they were to be caught in the civil war. They were even laughing at how foolish they were to have been used to the point of being destroyed in body and soul. And now, they truly admired Pangu from the bottom of their hearts. He had only died because he was ambushed by 7 god-tier experts and was involved in a very unfair fight. This was enough to prove that back then, Pangu already possessed unparalleled strength. Where is Pangu's inheritance? The diagram spirit asked. It's in the lotus pond in the above-ground world, in the deepest part of the mud. The demon god said. All right, I understand. The diagram spirit took a deep breath and nodded. He had already known that the demon god was knowledgeable, but he had never expected him to know about Pangu's inheritance as well. There's one more I know of. Renzu's inheritance is in the cave at the peak of the mountain. The god of fire told everything he knew about the god-tier inheritances. I'll go tell Lin Ming about the useful information, the diagram spirit said. At this moment, the information they had was about the 4 god-tier inheritances that were all top-tier inheritances. At the very least, Pangu's inheritance was definitely stronger than theirs. All right. If Lin Ming can obtain all of these inheritances, it would take him less than 100 years to reach the god tier, the demon god said. That's true, the diagram spirit nodded. This predicted duration made him extremely excited. Because with Lin Ming's foundation, even if he had just reached the god tier, he could still resurrect them. The diagram spirit had had enough of wasting away. At this moment, although the 3 magic elements in the current Lin Ming were all at the peak of tier 10, the magic power in Lin Ming's body was still endless. This was because even though the fusion of the spirit pool and the lightning pool had opened up a new magic element for him that had instantly advanced to tier 10, only less than half of the power had been used. Lin Ming suddenly remembered that the diagram spirit had told him to inject the remaining power into every cell of his body. Since he could infuse the energy into his cells, that meant he could infuse magic elements into the heart of the world tree as well. At this moment, the god-tier blood in the world tree's heart began to circulate in Lin Ming's body. With this, Lin Ming's body became extremely heavy. Although the current Lin Ming's physical body could be said to have reached a certain level of toughness, the god-tier blood weighed down on him so much that he couldn't even stand up. I should infuse all of my strength into the blood. Lin Ming made up his mind. He closed his eyes and injected every remaining bit of his power into the god-tier blood. Thump, thump, thump. At this moment, the heart of the world tree had already merged with Lin Ming's body. The heartbeat was powerful and firm. Apart from making Lin Ming's body heavy, the god-tier blood brought tons of benefits. The pain he experienced this time was the worst among all the inheritances that Lin Ming had received. However, the benefits were definitely the greatest. Because this time, his blood had been completely transfused. Buzz. Lin Ming controlled the surging magic element energy in his body and poured it all into the god-tier blood. When Lin Ming opened his eyes, his body felt relaxed. Your tier has stabilized. The diagram spirit was right next to Lin Ming. When he saw Lin Ming open his eyes, he asked. Yes, thank you, Senior. Lin Ming hurriedly bowed. There's no need to be so polite. This time, I'll give you a few more surprises. The diagram spirit waved his hand and said, your growth rate is quite impressive. In such a short time, you've absorbed and stabilized all the power in the lightning pool and the spirit pool. The god-tier bloodline has merged with you as well. Looking at Lin Ming, the diagram spirit revealed a satisfied smile. What surprised me the most was your ability to fuse the heart of the world tree into your own body within such a short period. The diagram spirit continued. You really are a pleasant surprise. Although I've brought you some pleasant surprises, to be honest, you're my pleasant surprise. The diagram spirit sized up Lin Ming and clicked his tongue. Thank you for your praise, Senior. If it weren't for the existence of all the seniors, I'm afraid I would remain useless. Lin Ming quickly spoke. He couldn't withstand such praise. Although Lin Ming was quite good, he still needed to be humble. You have achieved such accomplishments with our help, but I'm sure that without the few of us, you won't be a far cry from what you are now, the diagram spirit said. To him, Lin Ming's words were indeed modest. Without the few of them, Lin Ming's advancement may be slower and his foundation may be built with half the speed, but his achievements would definitely not be low. He was the one who could become the first person to break through the barrier. How could it be that he would not be able to achieve anything just because he did not have the help of external forces? By the way, you now truly possess two hearts, thus, the recovery ability of your body and all kinds of strength will be doubled. In comparison to you, those sages have bodies and foundations that are far inferior to yours. I believe that they are also extremely envious of you. The diagram spirit recalled that when he was at tier 10, he didn't have a foundation like Lin Ming's. In other words, if he had half of Lin Ming's foundation, he wouldn't have been in such a miserable state. Oh right, I have said so much, but I haven't told you what my surprise for you is yet. The diagram spirit smiled. He had been too engrossed in lamenting that he hadn't got to the point yet. Senior, please speak. Lin Ming nodded and said, all right, I have brought you the locations of a few god-tier inheritances. If you obtain those god-tier inheritances, your strength should be able to reach the peak of the sage tier, the diagram spirit said. The locations of the god-tier inheritances? Hearing this, Lin Ming asked excitedly. The inheritances were simply sharp weapons for leveling up. Not only would they help one to level up quickly, but they would also make one's foundation stronger and stronger. Lin Ming had only obtained the 3 god-tier inheritances he had now by accident. After all, even the sages didn't know where the god-tier inheritances were located. And now, the diagram spirit had brought Lin Ming such a pleasant surprise. That's right. Listen to me first. The diagram spirit nodded before continuing. The 3 of us know where the locations of 4 god-tier inheritances, including the Victory Buddha, the Emperor, Renzu, and Pangu. Wow! Lin Ming said in shock. This was a hugely pleasant surprise. Even in Lin Ming's world, he had heard of the 4 god-tier inheritances. Moreover, to think that Pangu's inheritance was among the 4. In Lin Ming's original world, Pangu was an existence that could split the heavens and earth. He never expected that Pangu would exist in this world as a god-tier powerhouse. Their locations are the diagram spirit told Lin Ming the locations. Right, if you follow the order in which I tell you to obtain the god-tier inheritances, it will be easier for you. If you go for Pangu's inheritance straight away now, I'm afraid it will be extremely difficult, and the chances of failure will be very high. So I suggest you go for Pangu's inheritance last. That will greatly increase your chances of success, the diagram spirit said. Pangu had been extremely powerful when he was alive. His inheritance would be even more difficult. Senior, please enlighten me. Lin Ming nodded and said, very well. The first one you should go for is the Victory Buddha's inheritance. Although the Victory Buddha's combat strength surpasses the Emperor's inheritance definitely surpasses the Buddha's. After all, the Emperor had the most powerful faction back then. He was the one who created the Heavenly Court. The diagram spirit said. Thinking back, the faction that the emperor had back then was the most powerful. Although the emperor would be no match for the victory Buddha in a one-on-one match, if the two forces clash, the victory Buddha would not be able to defeat the emperor. This was because the emperor had two god-tier subordinates back then, and if they worked together, they could defeat the victory Buddha. Therefore, the emperor's inheritance would have more requirements. After the emperor's inheritance will be Renzu's inheritance. After all, compared to Renzu, the emperor's achievements are still a little low. If one did not take into account combat strength, Renzu was the strongest human. He was also the first human to gain intelligence. Therefore, Renzu's status was higher than the emperor's. Of course, they were all god-tier powerhouses at the peak, thus the difference would not be much at all. Lastly, Pangu's inheritance. In our hearts, only Pangu is worthy of the title Great Emperor. The diagram spirit said. He truly admired Pangu. He was not the only one who felt this way. Even the demon god and the god of fire in Lin Ming's deepest consciousness had the same thoughts. Oh right, senior diagram spirit, are there not such existences like the god of water or the god of earth? I've never heard about them from you, Lin Ming asked. Since there was a god of fire, why were there no gods of the other elements? There is god called Narcissus who specializes in the water element, but there are none for the other elements like the earth element, the diagram spirit explained. After all, every mage in every element has different talents. Back then in that era, nobody in those elements could become a god tier. Later on, the path of the god tier was blocked, and thus it was even more unlikely that there would be anyone who could become a god. The 5 elements of gold, wood, water, fire, and earth had an equal share of mages. Even the rare lightning element and dark magic had their share of mages. However, it was just so that some elements did not have god-tier mages. Hence, there was no such thing as the god of water and the such. If you fuse all your magic elements into one and break through to the god tier, you will be the only chaos mage, and the only god tier chaos mage at that. The diagram spirit said. Up until now, not one chaos mage had existed. This was because the chaos magic couldn't be obtained through awakening. Therefore, it wasn't something that could be decided by talent. One needed to fuse all the magic elements. One should know that some magic elements worked well together while some didn't. Some magic elements were easy to fuse, but the fusion of some magic elements might kill anyone who tried. Not to mention, the magic elements were not limited to the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. If there were only these 5 elements, it wouldn't have been that no one had achieved the feat of being a chaos mage in hundreds of thousands of years. One had to know that there were many more other magic elements. Water and fire were incompatible, but one could still grasp a balance between them. However, the fusion of dark magic and light magic was impossible. Where there was light, there would be no darkness. Where there was darkness, there would be no light. There were also the lightning element and so on. It was very difficult to truly fuse them all. Therefore, in hundreds of thousands of years, no one could accomplish such a feat. However, this was the only path that Lin Ming had been given. If Lin Ming took the conventional path now, let alone whether he would be able to reach the god tier, it would be extremely difficult for him to break through the blocked path as it was the work of several god tier experts. Imagine, you were walking on a path, and suddenly the next step led to a cliff. If you were to continue forward, you would fall to your death. But you could also have a chance at surviving the fall. Now, the actions of the surviving god tier experts were like putting a transparent wall of air in front of you. If it weren't for the fact you could see the scenery in the distance, you might have thought that this was the end of the world. However, it just so happened that with your strength, you were unable to break through this transparent wall of air. Now, there was finally someone who had the foundation to break through this wall of air. Putting the question of whether it would be difficult for one to break the wall of air aside, as long as one could do so, the people who created the wall would sense it immediately. They could easily destroy you. And thus, one could only use unconventional methods to break the wall. For example, digging a tunnel. Now, the path that the diagram spirit and the others had pointed out to Lin Ming was akin to digging a tunnel. This would make it so that the few god-tier existences would be unable to discover Lin Ming's existence. The chaos element was this tunnel. Lin Ming, if you can do this, even if you've just entered the god tier, the few of them combined won't be a match for you. Even though they've existed for hundreds of thousands of years, the chaos element can crush them. Even the cultivator had just become a god, the diagram spirit said. He was looking forward to the success of Lin Ming's fusion. Senior, You just said that in hundreds of thousands of years, no one could complete the fusion and become a chaos mage, right? Lin Ming asked. In hundreds of thousands of years, no one could become a chaos mage. That's right, the diagram spirit nodded. That's Lin Ming frowned. I can even say that for hundreds of thousands of years, no one has been able to obtain my inheritance, and for hundreds of thousands of years, no one has been able to become the person to break through the god-tier barrier. So, why can't you become the first chaos mage? The diagram spirit looked at Lin Ming and said, I understand, senior. Thank you. Lin Ming nodded, his heart filled with excitement. All right, now that you've obtained all of my inheritance and the vermilion bird has acknowledged you as her master, the heaven and earth diagram is your divine artifact as well. After the diagram spirit said this, for some reason, he sighed. The heaven and earth brush is in the heaven and earth diagram. The inheritance process has ended. Do you still have any questions? The diagram spirit asked Lin Ming. Although he wasn't Lin Ming's teacher, Lin Ming had obtained his inheritance and was thus his inheritor. If Lin Ming had any questions, the diagram spirit would be the first to answer. Whatever I gained from the inheritance is all stabilized, Lin Ming replied. Lin Ming had already stabilized everything he had obtained from the diagram spirit's inheritance and could use them at will. That's good. Haha, you brat, not only are you lucky, you're also monstrously genius. To be able to take everything he had gained from the inheritance as his own in such a time, and the many benefits he had obtained in the end, everything Lin Ming did had far exceeded their expectations. All right then, you'll need to explore the rest of the matters on your own. We've already told you the direction you should go in, the diagram spirit said to Lin Ming. Yes, senior, Lin Ming nodded. After the diagram spirit had explained everything clearly, his figure disappeared from the spot. At this moment, the vermilion bird couldn't help but shed tears, because from what she could sense, the diagram spirit had completely disappeared. All right, don't be sad. As soon as I reach the god tier, the first thing I'll do is revive senior diagram spirit, Lin Ming said to the vermilion bird. Plus, I'll definitely reach that tier. Lin Ming was the only one who could do this. Let's go. Lin Ming took a deep breath. Since the diagram spirit and the other two seniors had already pointed out the path he should take, he had to hurry up and obtain all the inheritances. Only by finishing the path as soon as possible would he feel at ease. After all, there were too many variables. Lin Ming had just left the heaven and earth diagram when the diagram spirit's figure appeared once again. Did you obtain the inheritance? The figure asked Lin Ming. From. Lin Ming said coldly. Lin Ming knew exactly where this guy was from. This was the combination of the blue figure and the red figure from before. Due to their unique characteristics, they could merge into one. Even though they were at the half-step god tier, Lin Ming had no fear of them at all. How dare you be so disrespectful to me? You're courting death. Hearing Lin Ming tell him to scram, the figure's expression changed drastically. If it wasn't for your little bit of talent, I would have killed you long ago. I didn't expect you to take a mile when I've only given you an inch, the figure continued. I say, are you schizophrenic? The words you say don't even seem to be coming from the same person. Lin Ming looked at the figure and said, You. This sentence made the figure's heart skip a beat. Could it be that Lin Ming had discovered his secret? Although your face is the same as senior diagram spirits and I have to admit that you're the strongest person I've ever met, but your aura has exposed you. Lin Ming crossed his arms before his chest and said. These words caused the figure's attention to increase. Could it be that Lin Ming had seen through his disguise? How was his aura different from the diagram spirits? One had to know that he had the king tier bloodline of the diagram spirit, and was now half-step god tier. When it came to aura, no one could refute it if he said that his aura was the most similar to the diagram spirit himself. HMPH, I am the diagram spirit himself. How dare you say that my aura is not the same? It's just that my tier has dropped a bit. If it wasn't for this, I would have taken the heaven and earth diagram away long ago, the figure said to Lin Ming. All right, stop pretending. I already told you that your auras are different. Lin Ming waved his hand and interrupted the figure. Lin Ming didn't want to hear the figure pretend anymore. After all, it wasn't like Lin Ming didn't know the truth. Your aura is a little dreadful, Lin Ming said. What? How dare you say that my aura is dreadful? You're courting death. When the figure heard Lin Ming's words, he flew into a rage. To think that someone said that his aura was dreadful. This was simply unforgivable. The figure no longer cared what fortuitous encounters Lin Ming had in the heaven and earth diagram, or rather, he didn't care what Lin Ming had experienced in the diagram. Right now, he only wished to take Lin Ming's life. This was because the one thing he hated the most in his life was when others said he was dreadful. Kneel. Just as the figure made his move, Lin Ming said coldly, "You." With Lin Ming's words, the figure kneeled. He couldn't resist. The suppression didn't come from the difference in power, rather it was from the bloodline in Lin Ming's body. The suppression caused the figure to tremble. God tier bloodline, the figure said with a trembling voice. You obtained the God tier bloodline. This is impossible. Impossible. Following Lin Ming's suppression, the figure entered a state of madness. Shut up. Lin Ming spoke again. This figure didn't have any room to resist. The moment Lin Ming said as such, he immediately shut his mouth. The two of you, separate. There's no need to pretend anymore, Lin Ming said. This figure turned into two figures, the blue and red figure from before. The two figures were still kneeling on the ground. Without Lin Ming's orders, they didn't have the right to stand. They of course did not want to kneel to Lin Ming, but they had no choice. I won't control the two of you, but there is a prerequisite. Lin Ming looked at the two of them and said, "Please speak." The blue figure, Shui, was more mature. Before the red figure, Huo, said anything rash, he spoke first. The two of you follow me and protect me until I become a god tier mage, Lin Ming said. What? Until you become a god tier mage? You are only a tier 10 mage now. You're not even a sage tier mage. If we had to wait until you become a god, we'd both be dead by then. Why don't you just order us to serve you for the rest of our lives? After all, our bloodlines are suppressed and we don't have the ability to resist. Huo's temper was indeed fiery, even though he was being suppressed by Lin Ming's bloodline. Even now, he still refused to admit defeat. Even though Shui was more mature, he agreed to Huo's words as well. Lin Ming was just a tier 10 mage, and he was still far from the sage tier. Additionally, no one had been able to advance to the god tier for over 100,000 years. Now that Lin Ming had asked them to follow him till he reached the god tier, it did imply that he wanted them to serve him till they died. Oh? Lin Ming sneered and punched. Monstrous power landed on Huo's body. With a boom, Huo's body was sent flying. When Huo stood up again, he was swaying. Although he was no longer a half-step god after separating with Shui, he still had the power of a peak sage. But now he had been sent flying by Lin Ming. It didn't matter if he had been on guard against Lin Ming just now, because any ordinary tier 10 mage wouldn't have been able to cause any harm to him even if he fell asleep. Are you willing now? Lin Ming looked at Huo and said. Yes, heart and soul. Huo nodded and said. He could clearly feel that Lin Ming had used pure power in the punch just now. He hadn't used even a bit of his bloodline power. Him being a tier 10 mage, yet he could use such power. It was apparent that Lin Ming hadn't used his full strength at all. Therefore, Huo was willing to admit defeat. Although he had a fiery temper, he wasn't a fool. At his tier, he naturally understood more things. Follow me. Lin Ming didn't say any nonsense and left. Yes. Right now, both Shui and Huo had tacitly agreed that Lin Ming was their master. After exiting the place, Lin Ming didn't have any intention of leaving the underworld just yet. He wanted to see if the sacrificial ceremony to the underworld's god tier great elder had been forcefully stopped yet. Lin Ming drove to a nearby village. Who? Lin Ming let out a breath. Everyone in this village was here. Of course, Lin Ming would investigate the surrounding villages as well. After all, he had entered the underworld for this matter. After seeing that the people in the surrounding villages were all still alive and well, Lin Ming let out a deep sigh of relief. Lin Ming just couldn't stand seeing so many villagers sacrificed innocently. Lin Ming didn't care whether it was the above-ground world or the underworld. People were divided into good and evil, and there were also those who deserved to die and those who were innocent. Those who sacrificed these innocent villagers were people who deserved to die. Especially that underworld sage tier expert in the center of power. Lin Ming decided that the minute he reached that tier, he would kill him. Lin Ming checked a few more villages, and was relieved to find that they were all filled with people. Lin Ming. After his investigation and dealing with the other underworld sage tier experts, the sage tier expert in the center of power finally had the time to investigate. After all, no guard would have committed an easy mistake like killing the important members of the sage tier families. As expected, the minute he delved deeper into the investigation, he found that it was Lin Ming's doing again. The other sage tier experts weren't fools either. They must also have deduced that this matter had something to do with Lin Ming. However, due to Lin Ming's status now, not only could they not pursue Lin Ming's responsibility, but they even had to cooperate with Lin Ming to complete this matter, which was to force the underworld sage in the center to sign a treaty, stating that he would never pull off sacrificial stunts again. Besides, they were now with Lin Ming. If the underworld god tier Great Elder were to awaken, the first ones to suffer would most likely be them. Thus, they didn't wish for the awakening of the underworld god tier Great Elder either. Since Lin Ming had brought this matter out, they would go with the flow. Even though Lin Ming had sent some of the important members of their families to death by putting them in the batches of ordinary villagers that were to be sacrificed, the sages couldn't deny that these important members had indeed committed all sorts of crimes. There were even some who the sages themselves wanted to kill, but for various reasons and connections couldn't do so. Lin Ming had picked out the victims carefully, so even if they still felt a little uncomfortable now, but they had not lost any dignity of the sort, since each family experienced the same treatment. Lin Ming was quite fair, huh? At this moment, the underworld sage in the center, who had been forced to sign the treaty, was extremely furious. How did this guy get here? The underworld sage tier magical beast next to the underworld sage in the center asked. We should have been able to sense him if he entered our world, since we've always been monitoring the teleportation array, the sage tier magical beast continued. He was very curious as to how Lin Ming had deceived them when entering the underworld. This fellow's methods are endless. He might have entered our world through other methods, just like how our god tier Great Elder is in deep slumber just because he sealed him. Lin Ming really deserves to die. The underworld sage in the center said. He hated Lin Ming to the bone. Go. As he said this, a silk scarf that was initially in the hands of the sage tier magical beast disappeared on the spot. Let's go. The underworld sage in the center followed the silk scarf and disappeared. There are still some unknowns in the underworld, but since this matter has been resolved, it's time to leave. Lin Ming observed a few villages and found that things were how he wanted them to be. This made Lin Ming let out a sigh of relief. No matter what, this matter was very meaningful. This time, Lin Ming did not use his god tier power. Instead, he wanted to use the teleportation array to return. Lin Ming's figure was extremely fast. He disappeared on the spot, and in the next second when he reappeared, he had already arrived at the teleportation array. Lin Ming. Just as Lin Ming appeared, 3 figures appeared beside him. Tusk tusk, you must have a dog's nose. You sure follow fast. Lin Ming looked at the 3 who had appeared and sneered. Lin Ming, you framed me and made me sign a contract. The underworld sage in the center said coldly. You deserve it. You're at the peak of the sage tier. If you sacrificed yourself, your great elder would have immediately awakened. Why don't you just die then? Lin Ming said. I have a high status, and the great elder is a god tier expert. What's wrong with sacrificing these villagers? The underworld sage in the center shouted coldly. However, if we were to sacrifice you to the great elder, with your energy and blood, there would definitely be a pleasant surprise. The sage tier magical beast looked at Lin Ming and said, Your great elder isn't worthy of me as a sacrifice. Lin Ming sneered. The so-called god tier great elder was nothing in his eyes. In fact, in Lin Ming's eyes, the shitty great elder was even worse than an ordinary villager. Attack! The underworld sage in the center lost all patience and attacked directly. Chui, Huo, Lin Ming moved backward. Chui and Huo, what are you scared silly? The underworld sage in the center mocked after hearing Lin Ming's words. Boom! Suddenly, 2 attacks descended from the sky. A sage tier expert from the underworld. How come I've never seen them before? From the aura he sensed, the underworld sage in the center knew that these were experts from the underworld. However, he had never seen Chui and Huo before. After all, that place was a forbidden area even for sage tier experts. Try and severely injure them, Lin Ming instructed. Yes, master. Chui and Huo nodded simultaneously and began a chaotic battle with the 3 saint-level experts. Although they were fighting 2 against 3, they weren't at a disadvantage at all. The 3 underworld sage tier experts were even being suppressed at this moment. The 3 of them didn't have any spare power to deal with Lin Ming. Heavily injure them, Lin Ming said coldly. All right. Chui and Huo nodded. Even though they couldn't kill them in a 2-on-3 situation, they could still heavily injure one of them. When the 2 of them went face to face and merged into one. With this, their tier rose from the peak of the sage tier to the half-step god tier. Boom! With this fusion, their combined strength could be said to have risen by a huge margin. The figure immediately launched a vicious attack toward the subordinate of the underworld sage in the center, as he was the weakest. Boom! The figure's attack caught everyone off guard, and they were instantly sent flying far away. The figure followed. Heaven's illusion, this figure said coldly. The weakest fellow felt a wave of dizziness. Exploding skies. A red attack landed on the weakest underworld sage tier expert. The sage tier magical beast and the underworld sage in the center didn't even have time to react. Thus, they weren't able to do anything as they watched the figure attack. Pooh! The weakest underworld sage tier expert spat out a mouthful of blood. Shattering skies. A blue attack appeared. The attacks of Shui and Hugh landed heavily on the weakest underworld sage tier expert. Such an attack caused the sage tier expert to spit out another mouthful of blood. 2 mouthfuls of blood and an unknown amount of essence energy that came with the attack caused the sage to be morbid. Stop him! The underworld sage in the center panicked. He was aware that if these attacks had landed on him, he wouldn't have been able to react in time and his ending wouldn't have been any better. When had such a powerful expert appeared beside Lin Ming? Although there were many sage tier experts, there hadn't been a half-step god tier expert. Yet, a half-step god tier expert had now appeared beside Lin Ming. Not only had they been caught off guard, but the weakest underworld sage tier expert had also been injured heavily. All right, stop. Lin Ming's voice sounded as abrupt as the attack he had ordered just now. Although one of the 3 underworld sages had been injured, it was quite likely that Hugh and Shui wouldn't be able to severely injure another underworld sage tier expert again. Do you still want to sacrifice me? Lin Ming looked at the 3 of them with a mocking smile. The 3 of them had wanted to sacrifice Lin Ming, but now one of them had been severely injured. As for the remaining 2, they no longer dared to make a move against Lin Ming. Let's go! The underworld sage in the center snorted coldly and left. He was furious, but there was nothing he could do. He had no way of dealing with the current Lin Ming since there was a half-step god tier existence beside Lin Ming. If it was a one-on-one situation, none of the 3 of them would be a match for that existence. Let's go, Lin Ming said and teleported through the passageway. He had to go look for the other god tier inheritances. According to the diagram Spirit's final instructions, he had to go get the Victory Buddha's inheritance first. As such, Lin Ming was now rapidly moving forward towards the location. However, he just so happened to pass by the center of the giant cities on his way there, thus he conveniently headed to the center. Seniors, after entering, Lin Ming hurriedly greeted the sages. Lin Ming. Seeing Lin Ming return, the various sage tier experts surrounded Lin Ming. Your strength has increased once again, the sage tier elf said. You are now a tier 10 mage, but the power you possess far surpasses that of a tier 10 mage, right? The sage tier elf asked. The power fluctuations on Lin Ming's body had become more and more intense. Your strength should be about the same as mine now, right? An intermediate sage tier expert asked. I don't know my true strength either, Lin Ming shook his head and said. He was aware that his current strength was above that of a tier 10 mage, but he didn't know the exact value of it. After all, Lin Ming had too many trump cards. There were the mutated seeds of flame on him, and his various methods and artifacts. If all of these were integrated into combat and he released all his, Lin Ming didn't know exactly what tier his power would be at. Why don't we give it a try? The intermediate sage tier expert said to Lin Ming. Sure, Lin Ming nodded. We'll help you keep an eye on the battlefield, the remaining sage tier expert said. Since they were keeping an eye on the battlefield together, there wouldn't be any accidents. Please make your move, Lin Ming made a gesture and said. Haha, very well, the sage tier expert nodded. 1,000 miles of ice. The sage was an ice mage. It was just so that his power counter Lin Ming's flame power. However, Lin Ming's flame power was not any ordinary flame power. Fiery Phoenix spell. It had been since he had fought in a real battle. He had used the same spell he was used to using as before. A fiery phoenix appeared. Its head was made of the mutated seed of flame that was ranked first, and its body was made of the other 15 mutated seeds of flame. Although it was a tier 9 attack spell, it was extremely powerful in Lin Ming's hands. To say the least, a tier 10 mage would have been instantly killed by such an attack. It's indeed powerful. The power of 1,000 miles of ice was instantly disintegrated. However, Lin Ming's attack didn't slow at all. Icy technique. The sage tier mage was merely testing him just now. Facing Lin Ming's power now, he once again made a move to neutralize it. His move just now had been to test Lin Ming's power. The sage was worried that if he used too much strength, he would hurt Lin Ming. Now it seemed that his worries were unnecessary. Fuse, Lin Ming said coldly. More than 10 fiery phoenix spells were fused. The dazzling dragon spells were fused in as well. Go! Although the tiers of the attack spells weren't high, when released by Lin Ming, they had astonishing power. 1,000 miles of ice. The ice attack this time was way more powerful than the previous one cast. However, the power Lin Ming released this time was more powerful too. Boom! The air was burned and the space was melted. Lin Ming's power has really reached the sage tier, a sage tier expert said. That's right. However, although he has the power of a sage tier, he is still a beginner sage. His power should have just reached the sage tier, another sage tier powerhouse said. From the attack just now, he's indeed at a beginner sage, but he has yet to fully release his power. It's still too early to conclude, the sage tier powerhouse who had just spoken shook his head and said. That being said, our guesses shouldn't be too far off. With their experience, they could guess the tier of a person the minute the one raised one's hand to make a move. Boom! Lin Ming and the intermediate ice sage were once again locked in a stalemate. After a few rounds, the ice sage didn't dare to look down on Lin Ming anymore. This was because although his ice power seemed to be counteracting Lin Ming's flame power, how could the mutated seeds of flame be extinguished so easily? Even though the remnants of the seeds of flame had been surrounded by ice magic, if I could have a seed of flame, my strength would increase by a lot, a fire sage said with envy. His wish was to obtain even just one. After all, Lin Ming had 16 types of mutated seeds of flame. Dazzling ice, the ice sage said coldly once again. With this, even the soil around Lin Ming was frozen into powder. Flames burst out around Lin Ming's body, forcing the cold air to stay away from his body. But at this moment, the attack of the dazzling ice reached Lin Ming. Explode! The combination of the dazzling dragon spells and fiery phoenix spells suddenly exploded at this moment. The dazzling ice instantly disappeared without a trace. Even the ice sage was forced to take many steps backward at this moment. He's actually using this method to fight. Using the mutual repulsion of magic elements in combat was indeed rare. Absolute zero. At this moment, the ice sage used one of his strongest attack spells. Absolute zero. It was as if Lin Ming had entered a black hole. However, his expression didn't change. Darkness. Dark magic appeared around Lin Ming. He's using his second magic element, a sage tier mage at the side said. They had long known that Lin Ming had a second magic element, dark magic. However, they didn't know how much control Lin Ming had over dark magic. After all, Lin Ming had always used fire magic. Dark hell. Lin Ming spoke once more. As the dark magic erupted, the ice mage no longer had Lin Ming's figure in sight. Lin Ming's aura had also disappeared. He disappeared from my spiritual consciousness. This is impossible. The sage frowned and exclaimed in disbelief. After one had spiritual consciousness, no power below the sage tier would be able to escape one's eyes. He didn't expect that Lin Ming could disappear right before his eyes. What the sage didn't know was that Lin Ming's consciousness was now at the spiritual consciousness stage as well. Now that Lin Ming was hiding, the intermediate sage wasn't able to detect his aura at all. Boom! Just as the intermediate sage was still in shock, a flame attack suddenly appeared in front of him. Freeze! The intermediate sage quickly retreated. After reaching the sage tier, the strength of his physical body had undergone a qualitative change. Although his body wasn't as strong as Lin Ming's, he was still much stronger than a tier 10 mage. Thus, Lin Ming's attack was neutralized. Boom! Flames burst out under the feet of the sage. He's already made a move, but I still can't find his aura. At this moment, the intermediate sage was already panicking. The situation made him understand how monstrous Lin Ming was. Lin Ming had merely cast a tier 10 dark magic spell, yet it made it impossible for him, an intermediate sage, to lock onto him. And now Lin Ming had already launched an attack, yet his aura was still undetectable. This wasn't something that a tier 10 mage should be able to do. If Lin Ming hadn't obtained the mutated seeds of flame, I'm afraid his dark magic would probably have surpassed his fire magic by a lot, Gandalf said. He was also a fire mage, so he could see it clearly. Although Lin Ming didn't usually use dark magic in battle, it seemed that Lin Ming's dark magic was also very powerful, far more powerful than a tier 10 mage. One had to know that this was the dark magic Lin Ming inherited from the demon god. Whether it was the foundation or the attack spells of the dark magic, they were all top-notch. At this moment, more and more fire magic was surrounding the intermediate sage. However, the sage was still unable to lock onto Lin Ming. This made him a little anxious. Absolute zero. The entire space was frozen. Lin Ming's body was thus affected. He began to slow down. When, as the effects of the absolute zero on his body grew stronger and stronger, a burst of flame power appeared around Lin Ming's body. The surrounding ice power was instantly melted. Found you. As long as he could find Lin Ming's location, he could release an attack and accurately strike Lin Ming. Dazzling ice. Magic elements condensed in the intermediate sage's hands, and Lin Ming was surrounded by icy light. Of course, the dazzling ice that was released by Sage Tier Mage wasn't just a show of icy light. Even the slightest element around Lin Ming was a fatal threat. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. More and more attacks landed around Lin Ming. When Lin Ming's body immediately turned into a streak of fire. With this, one of the benefits of merging his body with the mutated seeds of flame was apparent. Lin Ming's entire body was now burning, but not only was he unharmed, but his power had also been replenished. The dazzling ice spell was immediately dissolved. Transforming one's body into flames is an ability that we just acquired at the peak of the sage tier. A peak fire sage couldn't help but speak. The strength that Lin Ming now possessed was too monstrous. He was only a tier 10 mage, yet he possessed the power that only peak sage tier mages could possess. And this was only one of his attacking methods. One had to know that Lin Ming possessed many things that even peak sage tier mages like them couldn't possess. For example, the mutated seeds of flame, god tier inheritances, the world tree's heart, and so on. Even with their cultivation at the peak of the sage tier, none of them had been able to obtain any of those things. Not only did the current Lin Ming have power on par with them, but he was also in possession of many things they yearned for and envied. Other than his cultivation base being inferior to theirs, Lin Ming could surpass them in every other aspect. If Lin Ming reached their cultivation base, they knew that he would be able to suppress them without a doubt. Even if Lin Ming had just reached the sage tier, he would still be able to suppress them. This was why they called Lin Ming monstrous. He was able to bridge the gap between tiers. Forbidden spell. Ice demon. At this moment, the intermediate ice sage couldn't control himself anymore and cast a forbidden spell. He used the power of a forbidden spell. A sage exclaimed. The other sage tier experts frowned as well. Even within battles between sages, the power of a forbidden spell was very difficult to withstand. One of the sages wanted to block the power of the forbidden spell for Lin Ming but was interrupted. Let Lin Ming test his true strength, Gandalf spoke. Everyone's attention was now focused on Lin Ming. They all wanted to see how powerful Lin Ming was. Darkness. Lin Ming said coldly. Lin Ming's aura disappeared without a trace again. Black fire. Lin Ming's flames were perfectly merged with the dark magic. I almost forgot that Lin Ming has a seed of flame that he's most proficient in, the black fire. Gandalf couldn't help but say at this moment. 1,000 lightning strikes. Suddenly, lightning condensed in the sky. Forbidden spell, Thunder God's Sigh. With his tier 10 thunder magic, Lin Ming had released the power of a forbidden spell. Thunder magic. All the sage tier experts present couldn't believe their eyes. They didn't expect Lin Ming to have a third element, thunder magic. Furthermore, Lin Ming's thunder magic was also at the peak of tier 10. What was even more ridiculous was that Lin Ming's thunder magic could release the power of a forbidden spell. He was merely a tier 10 mage. This is impossible. A thunder sage said. How can a tier 10 mage cast a forbidden spell? The scene before him was unbelievable. Let's skip the talk about whether it's possible or not. The truth is right in front of us, we have no choice but to believe it. Besides, if Lin Ming acted according to common sense, he wouldn't have been the one fated to break through the god tier barrier. A sage tier expert next to him said. Besides, what's there to ponder about the possibility? Have you ever seen a tier 10 mage who can fight a sage tier expert? The sage tier expert continued. Whether one believed it or not, a monster like Lin Ming would be constantly refreshing one's understanding. If one could deduce Lin Ming's actions according to common sense, he wouldn't have been the one fated to break through the god tier barrier. And now, Lin Ming could fight against a sage at tier 10. This made them believe that Lin Ming was indeed the one fated to break the god tier barrier. Right now they were even more loyal to Lin Ming. This was because a few words were clearly written on Lin Ming's body. I can break through the god tier barrier. Right now, Even if the three underworld sages in the center of power attacked Lin Ming, the other underworld sages would stand in front of Lin Ming without hesitation. They yearned to advance to the god tier with their heart and soul, and in their eyes, Lin Ming was their only hope. With three magic elements, it might be a little difficult for Lin Ming to break through to the sage tier. However, once he breaks through to the sage tier, even us sages who have been at the sage tier for thousands of years might not be his match, a sage tier expert said. The person who said this was Dong King. As the most experienced sage tier expert, Dong King was completely qualified to say this. Look at his current thunder magic. He's only a tier 10 mage, yet he can release the power of a forbidden spell. You're saying it will be a little difficult for him to break through to the sage tier. Though, your words that we will be no match for him the minute he breaks through is true, the sage tier powerhouse next to him said. If Lin Ming were to choose to break through now, they couldn't see anything preventing him from doing so. On the contrary, they could see that Lin Ming himself was suppressing the tier of his thunder magic, preventing himself from entering the sage tier. Boom! At this moment, the collision of the forbidden spells caused the entire area to explode. The grounds began to shake violently. If it weren't for the fact that there were so many sage tier experts controlling the battlefield to prevent the power from leaking out, the area would have collapsed. Lin Ming's figure couldn't help but retreat. Lin Ming's body only took a short while to recover. As for the sage tier ice mage, he had been through hundreds of battles. He had long used his ice power to neutralize the shockwaves, so he was fine as well. However, the speed of his recovery made Lin Ming suddenly think of something. He could totally add the strength of his body into combat. For a long time, Lin Ming had been going through fortuitous encounters one after another. Therefore, the number of actual combat that Lin Ming had experienced was scarce. This battle had allowed Lin Ming to understand some things. Boom! Lin Ming stomped on the ground and directly rose into the air. Just the force of his foot on the ground caused a huge crater to appear. Rumble! 3 types of magic power surrounded Lin Ming's body, and his aura disappeared once again. The Ice Sage could only see the thunder and flame magic around Lin Ming, as well as his fist. Lin Ming's physical body had already surpassed tier 10, reaching the level of an advanced sage tier. This was only because Lin Ming hadn't fully released his physical strength. If he did, the strength of his physical body would have reached the peak of the sage tier. After all, Lin Ming was a mage, not a berserker. However, with such a physical body he could be considered to have dual cultivation of magic and martial arts. Boom! Just as the ice magic blocked Lin Ming's magic power, a huge force suddenly pushed the Ice Sage a few hundred meters away. This is the power of the physical body. When the Ice Sage came to his senses, he was extremely shocked. To think that the power of Lin Ming's physical body had also reached the sage tier. One had to know that out of the many sage tier experts, only one was a sage tier secret swordsman. The rest were all mages. Because it was simply too difficult for one's physical body to reach the sage tier. Many berserker and secret swordsmen lost their lives when they attempted to break through to the sage tier. And now, while Lin Ming's magic power was so powerful, his physical strength had also reached the sage tier. We didn't forge his body for nothing back then. To think that this kid's physical strength has reached the sage tier as well, seeing that Lin Ming had such a powerful physical body, a sage tier expert couldn't help but exclaim, "Aren't you bullshitting?" Although our forging was somewhat useful, Lin Ming's physical body couldn't have reached the sage tier just by relying on our forging. A hot-tempered sage spoke up. "I was just saying, don't you think I know?" The sage tier expert's face turned red as he retorted. Both his physical body and his magic power are at the sage tier. Lin Ming's future cultivation is really hard for us to estimate. A sage tier expert sighed and spoke up. Now that he was saying this, he didn't know whether he was happy or sad. Even if they had reached the sage tier, each still had their selfish motives. I've never heard that the previous god tier experts were so monstrous when they were a tier 10, an underworld sage tier expert said. The underworld sages had access to some records since there was a slumbering god tier great elder in the underworld. Even the god tier great elder from before had no way of achieving what Lin Ming had displayed. What they didn't know was that even in the previous era when god tier experts were rampant, no one could be so monstrous as to achieve Lin Ming's current achievements. I'm afraid that in the future, Lin Ming's physical body and his 3 magic elements will break through at the same time. From what Lin Ming had displayed, he was simply monstrous in every way. Boom! Under the impact of all sorts of forces, this ice mage was gradually unable to withstand it. One had to know that Lin Ming was only a tier 10 mage, while he was a sage tier expert. The key point was that Lin Ming's attacks were impossible to defend against. Moreover, Lin Ming's strength seemed to be getting stronger and stronger as he fought. In addition, Lin Ming's 3 magic element spells were becoming more and more coordinated. Together with his physical strength, the sage tier ice mage felt as if he was fighting against 4 intermediate sages. Fuse! Suddenly, the 3 magic element spells fused. The fire and lightning elements disappeared into the air. Lin Ming's attacks were now invisible. The 2 attack spells were hidden within the dark magic, which had always been activated. As for the ice magic of the ice sage, Lin Ming transformed his body into flames, and this countered the ice element to the extreme. This made the ice mage feel a bit aggrieved. Lin Ming's fire element countered his ice element, and the mutated seeds of flame in Lin Ming's body gave him a headache. Those were seeds of flame that even sage tier water magic was unable to extinguish. Although the ice sage's ice magic was powerful in terms of offense against Lin Ming's mutated seeds of flame, it wasn't as effective as water magic. Pooh! Under Lin Ming's increasingly powerful attacks, the ice sage spat out a mouthful of blood. He was an intermediate ice sage, yet he had been beaten by Lin Ming to the point he had spat out blood. Isn't this too monstrous? Looking at the scene, a sage tier expert couldn't help but speak. I've never heard of such a thing before. Another sage tier expert also nodded. Originally, they had thought that Lin Ming's battle with the intermediate sage would just show them where his power was at. In their hearts, they had never expected that Lin Ming would win. They did not even expect a draw. But now, Lin Ming had beaten the ice mage to the point he had spat out blood. It was hard to believe. He's a tier 10 mage, yet against an intermediate sage. At this moment, all the sage tier powerhouses looked at the outcome of the battle in disbelief. Only one of the healing mages came to his senses and quickly cast healing magic. The ice sage had only spat out a mouthful of blood. He didn't suffer any substantial damage. The recovery ability of the sage tier physical body allowed him to quickly recover. Senior, Lin Ming stepped forward and reached out to support the ice mage. No worries, the ice mage waved his hand. I didn't expect to be defeated by a tier 10 mage in this lifetime. The ice mage lowered his head and couldn't help but sigh. You have to know that you were going against the person fated to break the god tier barrier. A sage tier expert beside him comforted the ice mage. To tell the truth, any sage tier expert wouldn't have an easy time losing to a tier 10 mage. Furthermore, Lin Ming isn't someone who can be judged with common sense. The sage tier expert continued. One had to know that Lin Ming hadn't used his full strength yet. Of the trump cards they knew of, they were aware that Lin Ming hadn't used many of them. If he used all of them, even an advanced sage wouldn't be able to resist. Lin Ming, when did you obtain thunder magic? A sage tier expert asked. Not long ago, Lin Ming answered truthfully. You just obtained it, yet you're already at the peak of tier 10, and have the ability to cast forbidden spells. Hearing Lin Ming's words, a lightning sage asked in disbelief. It was just too unbelievable. Then the sage tier mage wanted to say something else, but he suddenly felt as if he had a fishbone stuck in his throat. He couldn't spit the words out. It was too much of a blow. Lin Ming had just obtained thunder magic and was already at the peak of tier 10. Moreover, he could release the power of a forbidden spell with his thunder magic. Can you tell us how you obtained the other magic elements? All the mages in this world only had a single magic element. Now that Lin Ming had 3 magic elements, they were naturally very curious. The second magic element, dark magic, was opened up in my body by Senior Demon God. As for the third magic element, thunder magic was obtained with the help of Senior Diagram Spirit. However, Senior Demon God had integrated the lightning pool in the stupa into my body, which is why my thunder magic could directly advance to the peak of tier 10, Lin Ming explained. Of course, Lin Ming didn't say that if he hadn't worked hard in suppressing the lightning element, it would have already reached the sage tier. All of them were opened up by god tier experts? A sage tier expert couldn't help but want to ridicule. Lin Ming had already obtained 3 god tier inheritances. And them, as sage tier experts, had nothing. They had no hopes of opening up other magic elements like Lin Ming's, since it was apparent that they didn't have the ability to do so, and it seemed that only god tier experts could open up a second magic element. It was also very probable that Lin Ming might have more than 3 magic elements in the end. He might even be able to open up all the magic elements. This wasn't impossible, because in such a short time, Lin Ming had already obtained 3 god tier inheritances. I'm envious, I'm really envious. A sage tier expert couldn't help but say. Lin Ming, you are now qualified for the Battle of Fate. Gandalf suddenly spoke. Battle of Fate? Hearing this, Lin Ming frowned. There was such a thing as a Battle of Fate. That's right. The Battle of Fate requires you to enter the heart of the world and fight for fate. Of course, the Battle of Fate can only be participated by those below the Sage tier. You being tier 10 is just nice. If you can obtain all of the fate, you will reap great benefits. After all, fate is involved in too many things. It includes luck, power, everything. Fate is really the best, Gandalf explained. Fortunate fate was something that everyone wanted. At the same time, it was something that no one in this world could have. But what if Lin Ming could obtain it? The benefits you said don't cover it. Lin Ming, even if you alone were to obtain fate, our world would be able to reap great benefits, a sage tier expert added. This world will be able to reap great benefits? Hearing this, Lin Ming understood just how much of a good thing fate was. That's right, the sages nodded. However, in our world, no one had ever obtained fate. Gandalf spoke. No one? Hearing this, Lin Ming frowned. Just from this, he knew just how difficult it would be to obtain fate. That's because after entering the heart of the world, you can obtain the fate of other worlds, but it's also possible for other worlds to snatch the fate of our world. Once your fate is plundered, you will die on the spot, Gandalf said. It's that cruel? Either one dies, or one obtains fate, and thus gains great benefits. This was simply exchanging one's life for fate. We did think about trying back then, but in the end, none of us went. Gandalf sighed and said. Why is that? Lin Ming asked. Because the people who entered all died. No one could survive. There was this one guy who did, but he only survived for less than a day. He said that although the people who were fighting for fate were all at tier 10, they were too strong. Gandalf replied. Those people weren't just from our world, instead they were from other worlds. Hearing this, Lin Ming frowned. If that was the case, then it was very simple why Gandalf had just said that no one in this world had ever obtained fate since there were other worlds. He had also mentioned that the other tier 10 experts were all too powerful. That's right. There are other worlds, Gandalf nodded. However, as Sage Realm mages, we are unable to explore the other worlds, Gandalf continued. Then, teacher, do you know what tier 1 needs to be at to be able to go to the other worlds? Lin Ming asked. According to the records, a few god tier experts from our world had left our world. Thus it should require one to be a god tier expert. But now, other than the underworld god tier great elder who is still in slumber, there are no other god tier experts in our world. Back then, when there were still god tier experts, they could enter the other worlds. However, only our world has such a perfect system. Gandalf continued. According to the records, the cultivators of those worlds live in the void, and are thus extremely powerful. There were too many dangers in the void, which made the cultivators stronger. The underworld and the above-ground world were originally one. Just because of that son of AB*TCH, so many people lost their lives. Looking back at it now, it's just so laughable. Lin Ming thought about how so many lives had been lost on the battlefield. So many innocent villagers had been sacrificed as well. That's right. In the future, we will have a common goal, an underworld Sage Realm Mage said. What goal? Another Sage Realm Mage couldn't help but ask. Follow Lin Ming and hope that Lin Ming will become a god tier expert. The underworld Sage Realm Mage laughed loudly. Lin Ming, whether others can succeed or not I don't know, but I believe that you will succeed. Because the power you have is just monstrous. With the power you have, I'm afraid that even the tier 10 experts from other worlds won't be a match for you. Gandalf said. That's right. Even though you're just at tier 10, you can already fight against an intermediate sage till he vomits blood. I really can't think of anyone who can surpass you. The people around echoed Gandalf's words. Lin Ming was their hope and he was simply too strong. In their opinion, no matter how strong the opponent was, the opponent couldn't possibly surpass Lin Ming. If you can obtain fate, the god tier barrier will probably be much weaker and easier to break through. If you obtain all the fate, I'm afraid the god tier barrier in this world might just disappear. The benefits brought by fate were too many, and they were all benefits to this world. There's still half a year left till the Battle of Fate. Do you want to make some preparations? Gandalf asked. There's still half a year? That's good, Lin Ming nodded. Lin Ming had long heard of things like fate. Now that he could obtain it, Lin Ming wanted to give it a try. I still have a few things to settle, then I'll participate in the battle of fate, Lin Ming said. All right. Whatever Lin Ming did now, they would unconditionally support him. Do you need our help? A few Sage Realm experts asked. There's no need. I can take care of it. Lin Ming waved his hand. He needed to go get the God tier inheritances. There was indeed no need for others to help him. In addition, he had planned out the sequence in which to go get the 4 God tier inheritances. All right. Do you still need any spiritual treasures? Gandalf asked. With the many Sage Realm experts around, the spiritual treasures they had in their hands were of the highest tiers. If Lin Ming said yes to Gandalf's question, he could probably be drowned in a pile of advanced spiritual treasures. No, I have enough spiritual treasures now. Lin Ming waved his hand again. The sages owned many spiritual treasures that anyone would yearn for, but Lin Ming wasn't interested in them at all. Kid, you must have made a fortune after obtaining so many God tier inheritances. Come on, take them out and let us have a look. Hearing Lin Ming's refusal, a Sage Realm expert laughed loudly. That's right. None of us have divine artifacts. Why not you take yours out and let us have a look? As this Sage Realm expert spoke, the other Sage Realm expert said as well. All right, Lin Ming smiled and nodded. In any case, he wasn't worried at all that they would be able to steal his divine artifacts. This is the stupa. With a wave of Lin Ming's hand, the stupa appeared in front of everyone. The original form of the stupa was a 9-story tower. The longevity monument appeared in front of everyone. Although the longevity monument was a pseudo-divine artifact, it was still a divine artifact. And the Wheels of Wrath. The power of energy and blood from the Wheels of Wrath made all the Sage Realm experts present tense. The power of the stupa and the longevity monument that Lin Ming had just taken out were both extremely reserved. Although the power of the Wheels of Wrath was reserved as well, it was the #1 offensive artifact. Its power of energy and blood couldn't be hidden. This is the Heaven and Earth diagram. Lin Ming took out his last divine artifact. Oh my God! As Lin Ming took out the 4 divine artifacts, all the Sage Realm experts were stunned. They had known long ago that Lin Ming had divine artifacts, but they thought he only had 2. As for them, they had none, but they hadn't expected Lin Ming to take out 4 divine artifacts. 4. You! I can't take it anymore. This is too much of a blow. No wonder Lin Ming doesn't want our spiritual treasures. He doesn't need any. He has so many divine artifacts. It's really making people envious. I've lived for 2,000 years and haven't even touched a divine artifact. As Lin Ming took out the 4 divine artifacts, the sages were all in an uproar. Of course, at this moment, there were bound to be envious people. People with covetous thoughts appeared as well. Why aren't you coming out to greet my seniors? Lin Ming suddenly said. As soon as Lin Ming said this, 4 figures appeared before the crowd. Greetings, seniors. The artifact spirits of the 4 divine artifacts appeared. These are the artifact spirits? This was the first time the Sage Realm experts had seen artifact spirits. After all, only divine artifacts had artifact spirits. They possess formidable battle prowess themselves, right? Sensing the covetous thoughts in the crowd, Gandalf said promptly. Yes. It was the stupa that suppressed the battlefield in Giant City last time. I believe all of you have witnessed it before. Lin Ming nodded and said. As soon as Lin Ming said this, everyone present exclaimed in surprise. Don't you have to control the stupa when it releases its suppression power? A Sage Realm expert couldn't help but ask. All of them possessed the strongest spiritual treasures. If these spiritual treasures were given to ordinary low-tier mages, they wouldn't be able to activate them even if they tried. In comparison with the divine artifacts, the spiritual artifacts were like dirt, while the former was like the sky. And now, he was telling them that the mage's power was not needed to activate a divine artifact. If it's just suppressing power, I'm not needed. After all, isn't there the artifact spirit? Lin Ming smiled and said while pointing at Gandalf. As expected, a divine artifact is a divine artifact. With such powerful power, to think that it can just be controlled by the artifact spirit? A Sage Realm expert nodded. Although all this information was recorded, Lin Ming, the owner of 4 divine artifacts, was here. They would be stupid if they choose to believe the records instead of Lin Ming's words. Back then, I was only a tier 7 mage. If I had to activate it, I wouldn't have been able to do so, Lin Ming added. A tier 7 mage simply didn't have the power to activate a divine artifact. You could suppress the entire battlefield at tier 7 back then. I see you've been a monster since the very beginning. A Sage Realm expert couldn't help but sigh. Who could obtain a divine artifact at tier 7 and become its owner? And who could obtain 4 divine artifacts at tier 10? The Wheels of Wrath is the most powerful offensive artifact. It can convert the power of blood and energy. Lin Ming pointed at the Wheels of Wrath. Of course, right now, I can only use and know the most basic of their powers. After all, my current tier is still lacking. Other than the most basic suppression power and conversion of the power of energy and blood, the rest will have to wait until I advance into higher tiers. Lin Ming continued to speak the truth. After all, even by telling them about the power of suppression, the restless hearts of these Sage Realm experts had been completely suppressed. Moreover, after reaching the Sage Realm, they thought in extremely long terms. On one hand, there was no way for them to obtain the God-tier artifacts by force. On the other hand, Lin Ming was the only one who could break the God-tier barrier. Compared to the divine artifacts, it was still more tempting to be able to reach the God-tier themselves. After all, the most important thing was to strengthen oneself. It can convert the power of energy and blood? So back then, you had used the Wheels of Wrath to convert the power of energy and blood that had long been accumulated in the giant city. After hearing Lin Ming's words, an underworld Sage Realm expert couldn't help but ask. One had to know that the power of energy and blood on the giant city battlefield back then was enough for a feast for the God-tier Great Elder. However, at the critical moment, all the power of energy and blood had disappeared without a trace. Only the power of the soul was left. That was why the Great Elder couldn't be awakened. Later on, when after great difficulty, they had just about managed to wake the Great Elder, Lin Ming appeared again. With the demon god's soul, Lin Ming had sealed the God-tier Great Elder once again. It could be said that the God-tier Great Elder had met his nemesis. That's right, it was me. That's not all. The person who sealed the underworld God-tier Great Elder and the person who stopped the underworld sacrificial ceremony were both me. Lin Ming nodded and owned up to his actions. Good job for sealing that bastard. Lord knows what that God-tier Great Elder would have done after he awakens. If he awakens, everyone in both worlds would have become slaves. After hearing Lin Ming's words, the underworld Sage Realm experts didn't get angry. Instead, they clapped their hands in delight. It was still the same logic. Rather than waiting for others to be awakened, it was better if they became gods themselves. So all the power of energy and blood has been absorbed by the Wheels of Wrath. Another Sage Realm expert asked. No, I was the one who absorbed the power. Lin Ming shook his head and replied. You were only a tier 7 mage back then. And the power of energy and blood was so much. Lin Ming's words made them feel incredulous once again. The power of energy and blood was so much that even the God-tier Great Elder could have a feast. To think that Lin Ming had absorbed all of it when he was only a tier 7 mage. Even a tier 10 expert would have his body explode from the sheer amount of energy. On top of that, even the Sage Realm experts would need a long time to absorb such an amount of the power of energy and blood. After all, the power of energy and blood was different from other types of energy. When one absorbed the power of energy and blood, one had to pay attention to prevent any backlashes. If it was absorbed too quickly, one could easily go berserk. But back then, Lin Ming hadn't taken long if his words were true. Because Lin Ming had sneaked into the underworld with haste and sealed the Great Elder back then. So the power of energy and blood that you have now is extremely huge, isn't it? No wonder your body can be so strong. We've been accumulating it for so long, but now it has enabled your dual cultivation of magic and martial arts. After Lin Ming said this, the Sage Realm experts were once again amazed. To awaken the Great Elder, the war had lasted for a very long time. In the end, the power of energy and blood that they had accumulated for so long had benefited Lin Ming. Let us see how terrifying the power of energy and blood is, a Sage Realm expert said impatiently. Even Sage Realm experts like them were eager to see everything that Lin Ming had on him. Lin Ming, you can refuse, Gandalf said. The other Sage Realm experts didn't say anything after Gandalf said this, because it was Lin Ming's freedom of choice and was also Lin Ming's trump card. Besides, no one in their right mind would flaunt their trump card around. Teacher, it's all right. After all, the seniors here are all gathered for me, Lin Ming smiled. Lin Ming knew that Gandalf was doing this for his good. However, Lin Ming was also aware that these Sage Realm experts could control their greed. Lin Ming waved his hand and put the 4 divine artifacts back into his body. Seniors, are all of you aware that I have fused the origin of life, the heart of the world tree, into my body. Lin Ming looked at the Sage Realm experts and asked, "This much we know." The Sage Realm experts naturally had a deep understanding of Lin Ming. Just as Lin Ming had said, they had come to this world for Lin Ming's sake. If it weren't for Lin Ming's existence, the underworld and the above-ground world would most probably still be separated. If it weren't for Lin Ming's existence, they would still be in combat. Now, thanks to Lin Ming, the war had ended. Thus, Lin Ming didn't have anything to hide. Is the power of energy and blood related to the heart of the world tree as well? A Sage Realm expert asked. They were especially envious of Lin Ming's possession of the origin of life, aka the heart of the world tree. This was especially so for Dong King and the others who had been guarding the origin of life for so long yet hadn't dared to fuse it. After all, although the heart of the world tree would bring one great benefits if one didn't control it well, or if one didn't have enough foundation, one would only be crazily devoured. Lin Ming, on the other hand, had fused the origin of life into his body and taken it for his own use. The power of energy and blood have all been transformed by the heart of the world tree into life force, Lin Ming said. Furthermore, through obtaining the inheritance of the diagram spirit, the heart of the world tree has been fused with God-tier bloodline as well. Thus the power of energy and blood can now be said to be completely gone, Lin Ming added. All of it has been transformed into life force. Such an amount of power of energy and blood had all been converted into life force. How much life force would that be? Yes, Lin Ming nodded. Wait a minute, you just said that the heart of the world tree has also been fused with God-tier bloodline. Another Sage Realm expert had just come to his senses. The power of energy and blood wasn't the main point now. Lin Ming had a God-tier bloodline. Yes, Lin Ming nodded once more. You really make people envious. At this moment, everyone was at a loss for words. They only knew to repeat that they were envious. No wonder your physical body can be so powerful since you have a God-tier bloodline. I was wondering why the power of energy and blood alone could make your physical body so powerful. Everyone finally understood why Lin Ming's physical body was so powerful. How many more trump cards do you have that will cause our envy? Another Sage Realm expert couldn't help but ask. They were once again envious of the God-tier bloodline they had just found out about. At this moment, everyone's covetous thoughts had disappeared, replaced by numbness. They felt that it was only right for Lin Ming to have these things. And now, they were even more convinced that Lin Ming could break the God-tier barrier. Therefore, they felt an indescribable sense of trust and loyalty towards Lin Ming. Everyone, I don't have anything else that's worth seeing anymore. After all, my cultivation is still low, Lin Ming smiled shyly and said. Lin Ming's words caused all the Sage Realm experts present to secretly ridicule him. You're only at tier 10, but you're able to beat an intermediate icy sage till he vomited blood. Furthermore, you have so many trump cards. It's only a matter of time before you advance past tier 10. And now you're saying such things, aren't you just trying to provoke them? Lin Ming, you definitely have something good that you haven't shown us yet, a Sage Realm expert said. From their point of view, Lin Ming should still have other things that were at the same level as the divine artifacts. How could he just stop here? I indeed have something I haven't shown you, but I'm not sure if you guys will think much of it. Lin Ming rubbed his hands and said. There's more? Come on then, take it out. Hearing Lin Ming's words, they were all excited. I can draw, Lin Ming smiled and replied. Drawing? Is there anything special about it? Hearing this answer, the Sage Realm experts were naturally not satisfied. However, they knew that since Lin Ming said it, it would not be any simple drawing. Allow me to show my drawing skills today. Lin Ming chuckled. He had a bold idea. Could he duplicate a world-class spirit gathering array into his body? If this idea was to be realized, he would need to understand the world-class spirit gathering array by heart, and he would have to be extremely familiar with its duplication. Everyone, please allow me to show you my drawing skills on the battlefield. After Lin Ming spoke, everyone stepped back, wanting to see Lin Ming's drawing skills. Pooh! Lin Ming let out a deep breath. Vermilion bird. As Lin Ming spoke, the vermilion bird appeared in front of Lin Ming. After the vermilion bird appeared, it put the heaven and earth brush into Lin Ming's hand. Seniors, I'm going to start drawing. After saying this, Lin Ming began to duplicate the world-class spirit gathering array. When Lin Ming had just started, everyone thought that Lin Ming was joking. However, as Lin Ming began his duplication, the expressions of some of the Sage Realm experts began to change. Among the Sage Realm experts, there were some array masters within. One of them had even broken through to the sage tier with the help of a raise. Thus, these few sage realm experts couldn't help but move closer to Lin Ming. However, they were quickly stopped. Following Lin Ming's duplication, the breathing of all the sage realm experts present became extremely faint. This is the world-class spirit gathering array of the underworld. The sage realm expert who whispered this almost bit his tongue off. One had to know that the world-class spirit gathering array of the underworld was carved by God-tier array master. And now, Lin Ming was duplicating the same world-class spirit gathering array. So what Lin Ming had just said, that thing that he wasn't sure if they would think much of, it was the world-class spirit gathering array. What a show-off! All of the Sage Realm experts retreated once more. They didn't even need anyone to give orders. They automatically joined forces to create a barrier in the area. No one could affect Lin Ming. Isn't this too much? One of the Sage Realm experts felt a little dizzy as he looked at the world-tier spirit gathering array. After all, this was a spirit gathering array created by a god-tier array master. Even the Sage Realm experts felt a little dizzy after staring at it for some time. If it were any ordinary tier 10 expert, he would probably have gone berserk. As time passed, the world-class spirit gathering array slowly appeared before everyone. This can't be possible. Even if Lin Ming had taken out so many valuables earlier, they hadn't felt this way. After all, those were all external forces. Of course, they weren't denying that Lin Ming himself was strong. But now Lin Ming had drawn a world-class spirit gathering array. Furthermore, from the beginning until now, there hadn't been a single mistake. If there had been even the slightest mistake, this place would have exploded. The Sage Realm experts felt that all this was simply ridiculous, but they had no choice but to believe it. It's as if we're dreaming now, a Sage Realm expert couldn't help but say. It felt like they were in a dream, but at the same time, it was extremely real. This was because a world-class spirit gathering array was slowly taking shape in front of them. It was the world-class spirit gathering array that supposedly only god-tier array masters could draw. As time passed, the formation of the world-class spirit gathering array reached its most critical moment. At this moment, the Sage Realm experts all held their breaths. They wanted to witness the world-class spirit gathering array come to life in Lin Ming's hands. Buzz! As Lin Ming finished his last stroke, the surrounding magic elements surged like a storm. The unsuspecting Sage Realm mages staggered forward. This magic element storm was truly terrifying. Oh my God! Basking in the sudden surge of spirit energy, the Sage Realm experts simply felt as if they were in a dream. Lin Ming, you drew a world-class spirit gathering array. In the future, the battlefield in Giant City will be suitable for cultivation, Lin Ming said. This spirit gathering array itself would plunder the surrounding magic elements, but fortunately, the giants in Giant City cultivated with the power of energy and blood instead of magic. Thus, it was just right for Lin Ming to carve a spirit gathering array here. Boom! The three underworld Sage Realm experts felt the occurrence as well. Only the Sage Realm magical beast and the Sage Realm expert at the center had arrived at the site, as the other Sage Realm expert had been severely injured when Shui and Huo had merged as one previously. Now, sensing the energy fluctuations at the border, the two of them couldn't help but come and take a look. How dare you two appear here? Aren't you afraid of being severely injured again? Lin Ming looked at the two and mocked them. Lin Ming, you severely injured my disciple. Aren't you going to give me an explanation? The Sage Realm expert at the center spoke up. To think that he had come to demand an explanation. There are only the two of you left, yet you dare to come here and make demands of me. Lin Ming sneered. In an instant, he approached the two Sage Realm experts. Weren't you three severely injured? Lin Ming looked at the two of them, not thinking much of them at all. Besides, you were the ones who came to me. It has nothing to do with me. Lin Ming gathered his power and threw forward a punch. Seniors, the two of them have come to our world to threaten me. Lin Ming turned around and said innocently. As soon as Lin Ming said this, the many Sage Realm experts surrounded the two underworld sages, including the other underworld Sage Realm experts. Due to Lin Ming's various performances, they were extremely loyal to Lin Ming. Even if Lin Ming instructed them to make a move against the two underworld sages now, most of them would not hesitate to do so. After all, everyone lived for themselves. Now that the opportunity to advance to the god tier was right in front of them, how could they just throw it away? Moreover, the monarchy of the Sage Realm expert at the center had long made many underworld Sage Realm experts displeased. If it weren't for the chance that the Great Elder's awakening might help them become God-tier experts, they would have fallen out with each other long ago. And thus, they now stood on Lin Ming's side. What do you lot want to do? Seeing the other underworld sage realm experts show hostility toward them, the two were panicking. What do you think we're doing? Lin Ming sneered. When I was in the underworld, the three of you have surrounded me. Do you not remember why you did that? If I didn't have Shui and Hugh with me, how could I stand here unscathed? Lin Ming said. If he was caught by them in the underworld, his ending would have been extremely tragic. That being said, Lin Ming had quite a few trump cards now, and couldn't be caught by them anyway. How dare the three of you attack Lin Ming in the underworld? If any harm comes to Lin Ming, we will attack the underworld. Gandalf frowned and said coldly. The other sage realm experts looked at the two coldly as well. If anything happened to Lin Ming, they would probably eat the three of them alive. We're all from the underworld. We fought side by side. At this moment, the sage realm expert in the center could only try to get the hearts of the other underworld sages. Bah! An underworld sage realm expert spat. Do you think we are unaware of your wild ambitions? The sage realm expert said. Fram. Another underworld sage realm expert said. Wait a moment. I have a suggestion. Lin Ming spoke up. What suggestion? As Lin Ming spoke, the battlefield fell silent. From this, one could see Lin Ming's status. The underworld and the above-ground world were originally one world. Now that all the sage realm experts are here, why don't we merge them back into one world? It'll save us the trouble of battle in the future, Lin Ming said. The monarch in the underworld is too cruel, and the environment there is too harsh. The environment in the underworld was harsh, and because of the existence of the world-class spirit-gathering arrays in the cities, no mages or the professions had appeared in the villages. Now, Lin Ming wanted to change the unfair situation. That's good, a sage realm expert nodded in agreement. I agree. Me too. As Lin Ming spoke, the sage realm experts all agreed. We were originally one world, but have been forcefully divided into two worlds. It's just sad. If we can become one again, it will truly be a blessing, one of the sage realm experts said. The vast majority of the underworld sage realm experts agreed as well. This was because by merging the two worlds into one, they would be at the top of both worlds. In addition, the above-ground world far surpassed the underworld in every aspect. I disagree. The underworld sage realm expert at the center declared loudly. He was the master of the underworld. If the two worlds merged into one, he would be left with nothing at all. In addition, many of the things that he had planned wouldn't be realized. When the time comes, he would be like a rat crossing the street, hated by everyone. The minority will obey the majority, Lin Ming said. With just the two of you, what could you represent? Besides, you're nothing. If you keep blabbering, do you believe that you'll also be heavily injured? Lin Ming looked at the sage realm expert in the center and said coldly. Do you dare? The sage realm expert in the center still refused to admit defeat. Tisk, tisk. I can even kill you, why wouldn't I dare to heavily injure you? Lin Ming sneered. Shui Huo Lin Ming turned around and called. Yes, master. As soon as Lin Ming spoke, two figures appeared behind Lin Ming. Kill one, Lin Ming ordered. Yes. The minute Lin Ming ordered, the two merged into one. Half-step god tier. The aura of the two after they merged shocked everyone. This was because the strongest cultivator they had was only at the peak of the sage realm. Due to the obstruction of the path to god tier, no one could even advance to the half-step god tier. What Lin Ming had displayed just now had shocked everyone present, to the point they had forgotten to ask about the identities of the two people behind Lin Ming. Now that the two of them had merged, and were giving off the aura of a half-step god tier, all those present knew that these two were not to be underestimated. At the very least, in a one-on-one fight, no one present was a match for them. Seniors, I want to ask you to be villains. However, I hope that you won't become villains one day. Lin Ming looked at the underworld sage realm experts and said. The underworld sage realm experts all lowered their heads in silent agreement. They were truly relieved that Lin Ming didn't ask them to attack. If Lin Ming did ask them to do so, they couldn't refuse, but they would feel resistance in their hearts. After all, no matter what, they had been together with the three underworld sages day and night before all this. However, since Lin Ming didn't instruct them to be the villain, they naturally wouldn't interfere and try to plead for the two underworld sages. The sage realm experts on Lin Ming's side wouldn't and couldn't be on the same side with the two underworld sages. Furthermore, Lin Ming had made it very clear that if they interfered and helped the two of them, they would be treated as villains by Lin Ming. Attack! Use your strongest strength and end this battle as quickly as possible, Lin Ming ordered. Yes, the figure nodded and disappeared. At this moment, the sage tier magical beast's eyelids twitched. He was aware that he would be the victim of the attack this time, just like how the other underworld sage realm expert had been the victim last time and had been beaten till he was severely injured. Boom! From the sky, 2 attacks arrived. Who said that fire and water were incompatible? The 2 attacks in the sky complemented each other. This also inspired the future Lin Ming to fuse his powers after he created opposing magic. Roar! The sage realm magical beast immediately transformed into its original form. After all, this was the only way he could unleash his greatest strength. Bloodline suppression. At this moment, the aura of Tauti, who was at the back, fiercely suppressed the sage realm magical beast. Although they were both at the peak of the sage realm, the effects of the bloodline suppression were the most obvious between magical beasts. Following the bloodline suppression of Tauti, the sage realm magical beast started to lose control of its body. At the same time, the figure's attacks picked up in speed. At this moment, the sage realm expert at the center started slowly retreating. He didn't choose to help the sage realm magical beast. Instead, he chose to escape. Lin Ming naturally saw this happening, but he didn't order anyone else to stop him. After all, Lin Ming didn't want anyone else to be the villain. Besides, even if the sage realm expert in the center escaped, he would still be a commander with no soldiers. Now that Lin Ming could kill the sage realm magical beast, it meant that he could kill the sage realm expert at the center as well. It was most probable that the sage realm expert at the center would never dare to go anywhere near Lin Ming again in the future. Boom! As the battle went on, the sage realm magical beast turned around and fell into despair. This was because the figure of the sage realm expert in the center had disappeared without a trace. When the sage realm magical beast attempted to escape from the battlefield, he found that even though the sage realm experts on the side didn't attack, they were clearly sealing off his path of retreat. As the battle continued, the sage realm magical beast was completely suppressed. Boom! The sage realm magical beast spat out a mouthful of blood. His aura began to wither. Die! In the air, a murderous aura appeared. 1 minute, Lin Ming's voice rang out. As soon as Lin Ming's voice appeared, the figure stopped attacking. You have 2 choices. Be my mount or die. Don't try to bargain, and you only have 1 chance to choose. I don't like people who dawdle. Lin Ming looked at the sage realm magical beast coldly and said. Feeling the threat of death, the sage realm magical beast took a deep breath. He knew Lin Ming's personality. If he were to be stubborn, or try to negotiate a deal and was a little long-winded, Lin Ming's patience would probably be exhausted and he would kill him for real. I'm willing to be your mount. Sure enough, the sage realm magical beast didn't say anything unnecessary and immediately agreed. After all, as long as the green hills last, there'll always be wood to burn. It wasn't easy for him to cultivate to the sage tier, so it was a given he didn't want to just lose his life here. Sign the contract then. Lin Ming nodded and said, Honorable God of Contract, I, Sage Realm Magical Beast, am willing to accept Lin Ming as my master and become Lin Ming's mount. As the Sage Realm Magical Beast said these words, a contract array appeared. At this point, the Sage Realm Magical Beast had no other choice. As the contract took effect, he became Lin Ming's mount. This was the first time in over 100,000 years after the path to the God tier was blocked that a Sage Realm expert became a Tier 10 Mage mount. After all, upon reaching the Sage Realm, one would usually become the master of the world since one would be the strongest fighting force of the world. However, the current Sage Realm magical beast didn't have a chance at resistance. Either he agreed, or he died. Just nice. I can save my strength. Lin Ming smiled and rode on the Sage Realm magical beast. Seniors, farewell. Lin Ming laughed loudly as he disappeared from the spot while on the Sage Realm magical beast's back. He was now heading in the location of the inheritance of the Victory Buddha to obtain it. With the battle of fate coming, Lin Ming had to strengthen his foundation during this period. Oh, God! A Sage Realm expert had just come to his senses after Lin Ming left. To think that Lin Ming had used an underworld Sage Realm expert as his mount and left. Seniors, don't forget that you have to complete the task of merging the 2 worlds into one. Lin Ming's voice appeared in Giant City, but his figure had already disappeared. Everyone, let's head to the underworld together. An underworld Sage Realm expert suggested after hearing Lin Ming's words. All right. The many Sage Realm experts all nodded and they headed to the underworld together. They followed Lin Ming's instructions and merged the two worlds into one. Merging the two worlds into one was naturally simple, at least for them it was. This was because they were the most powerful forces in the world. Now, they just needed to let everyone in the two worlds know about the news. From now on, the ordinary villagers of the underworld could escape the fate of being sacrificed. This was because after the two worlds merged, the Sage Realm expert at the center would probably be killed immediately if anyone from the above-ground world was sacrificed. With the effort put in by the Sage Realm experts, the two worlds quickly merged. After all, the Sage Realm experts were the planners of the world. At this moment, Lin Ming had covered half the distance. As time passed, Lin Ming finally arrived at a waterfall. The gushing waters of the waterfall were extremely powerful. Even a Tier 10 expert would be severely injured if they were hit. At the bottom of the waterfall, however, the water flow was exceptionally calm. If not for the fact that Lin Ming knew of the exact location, he probably wouldn't have believed that the inheritance of the Victory Buddha was here. Even if some Sage Realm experts could discover the place, the various mechanisms within would prevent them from truly obtaining the inheritance. Whoosh! The Sage Realm magical beast that Lin Ming was sitting on leaped into the waterfall. After entering, Lin Ming was shocked to discover that the setup inside was as if a family lived here. However, everything inside was made of stone. Even the peaches of immortality on the stone table were made of stone. However, even though everything here was made of stone, there were no signs of corrosion even after the few hundreds of thousands of years. It was apparent that this place was extraordinary. Wait for me outside. Don't come in without my order, Lin Ming said after getting off the Sage Realm magical beast. Yes, the Sage Realm magical beast said after taking human form. Right now, he had no ability to resist Lin Ming's orders since the power of the contract was too strong. You two keep an eye on him, Lin Ming said to Huo and Shui. Yes, master. Huo and Shui nodded. Lin Ming's bloodline suppression towards them made it so that they could not resist or have second thoughts. As the three of them left, Lin Ming began to carefully observe the area. Water Curtain Cave. When Lin Ming raised his head, he saw three big words appear above his head. Although the Victory Buddha had powerful combat power back then and had even made the heavenly court established by the emperor be in fright from battles with him, he did not have a divine artifact. The weapon of the Victory Buddha, the Rui Golden Cudgel, was only a quasi-divine artifact. However, this also showed how powerful the Victory Buddha was. There was no artifact spirit here, so it was naturally more difficult for Lin Ming to find the inheritance. However, since Lin Ming knew the exact location, it was only a matter of time before he found the inheritance's mechanism. That being said, the mechanism to the inheritance of the Victory Buddha was indeed extremely difficult to find. Lin Ming searched high and low, but to his surprise, he had not triggered the inheritance here. The only things that can be moved in this water curtain cave are these stone peaches. Lin Ming held a stone peach in his hand and pondered. I have a set of steel teeth anyway, might as well try the peach of immortality just like the great sage. Lin Ming opened his mouth and took a bite. As Lin Ming bit down, a delicious taste filled his mouth. It could be said that this was the most delicious peach Lin Ming had ever eaten. Although it was a stone peach, it was also a peach of immortality. Ding! Congratulations to the host for eating the peach of immortality. Your lifespan has increased by 500 years. As Lin Ming ate the peach of immortality, the system's voice that hadn't sounded for ages appeared. Just a single stone peach had given Lin Ming an additional 500 years of lifespan. If these stone peaches were to be taken into the world, the Sage Realm experts would probably go green with envy. This was because lifespan was the rarest thing in the world. Furthermore, with an additional 500 years of lifespan, one could accomplish too many things. Buzz! As Lin Ming ate the peach of immortality, the surrounding environment suddenly changed. While Lin Ming watched the sudden change, and a suffocating feeling rushed to his head. There were corpses everywhere. They were the corpses of monkeys that had been beaten to death. A figure in monk robes was holding a monkey that had been beaten to death in his arms. You're here? This figure raised his head and looked at Lin Ming. Victory Buddha. Lin Ming put his palms together and said, Sit, the figure said with an aged voice. Yes, Lin Ming nodded and sat down. Never mind, the Victory Buddha who was clad in monk robes stood up. As he stood up, all the monkey corpses disappeared. The auras of three old friends, the Victory Buddha approached Lin Ming and said, Do you hate the emperor? Lin Ming didn't answer the Victory Buddha. Instead, he asked a question. No. After all, everything here wasn't caused by the Emperor, but by the cassock on me. The Victory Buddha shook his head and said, I can't take this cassock off. The Victory Buddha tugged at the cassock, but it didn't move at all. I have become stronger, but my faith is gone. The Victory Buddha sat on the ground again. Are you here to receive my inheritance? Looking at Lin Ming, the Victory Buddha asked. Since your faith is gone, I'll take my leave. Lin Ming stood up and made a farewell gesture. My inheritance isn't faith. You should know my inheritance is far superior to that of the god of fires and the diagram spirits. After all, I beat the crap out of them. When the Victory Buddha heard Lin Ming's words, he stood up in surprise. To think that Lin Ming rejected his inheritance. This was a god-tier inheritance. Furthermore, the quality of his inheritance was extremely high. After all, I don't want to have to wear a cassock just for an inheritance. Lin Ming bowed and prepared to leave. Ha ha ha, good. Very good. The eyes of the Victory Buddha finally came to life. This isn't what the three of them told you to do, right? The Victory Buddha came before Lin Ming and asked. Of course not. I simply refuse to wear this cassock for the rest of my life, Lin Ming said. The cassock represented shackles, something that Lin Ming did not wish for as long as he lived. The cassock is good in its way, but faith is more important. The Victory Buddha stood in front of Lin Ming. I am the Grand Sage. As he spoke, the cassock on his body started to burn. What replaced it was a long robe. The Victory Buddha was now clad in golden armor, with peacock feathers on his head. Great Sage. Lin Ming raised his head and could not help but feel shocked. It was not just the power fluctuations from the Great Sage's body. There was also the charisma from the Great Sage himself. The Great Sage represented freedom. Do you know that if I don't wear this cassock, I won't be able to reach the god tier? However, if I wear this cassock, I won't be myself even if I reach the god tier. The Great Sage sighed and said, in the end, I am stuck at beginner god tier. I was unable to continue raising my level. Because I entered a state of dilemma. Either I became a Buddha, or I returned to the peak of the sage realm. Through other means, I could re-enter the god tier. In the end, I almost went berserk. Fortunately, I came into actualization. The Great Sage almost went berserk at that time, because of the cassock. However, he came into actualization in the end. How did you break this stalemate? Lin Ming asked. Of course, it was to wreak havoc in the heavenly palace again. Then, I'll walk the same path as before. The Great Sage laughed loudly. I pressed forward, and the conflict in my heart disappeared. In the end, I even broke through to the intermediate god tier. This was the path of a Great Sage. Today, you and I are truly fated. I am not a person who cares so much. Since we are fated, this inheritance will be handed over to you. The Great Sage spoke. Come over. The Great Sage beckoned. All right. Lin Ming nodded. A pure person like the Great Sage would not have any other thoughts. Even if there were any traps or tests, he would still inform him in advance. Now, since the Great Sage had said that he would pass the inheritance directly to him, he would do so. Just like what the Great Sage had said, since he could not stay at the highest level, he would walk down the same path as before. If the Great Sage was even the slightest bit impure, he would go berserk at the beginner god tier. Go, I want to meet my old friend too. The Great Sage spoke calmly and placed his palm on Lin Ming's head. Roar. Lin Ming opened his mouth and let out a roar. Reinforced copper bone materialized from stone. The Great Sage muttered, the light of Buddha is merciful and shines on the earth. The Great Sage continued to speak. This light of Buddha won't bind you anymore. The Great Sage chuckled, and all the light of Buddha disappeared. The fiery eyes can see through everything in the world. The Great Sage's eyes emitted flames. Although your flame power is a mutated seed of flame, and is ranked extremely high, one thing is missing. The Great Sage looked at Lin Ming. Lin Ming was seen through with just a glance. May I ask what it is, sir? The 1st to 16th ranked mutated seed of flame was something that all the Sage Realm experts dreamed of obtaining. Since the Great Sage gave a heads up, was there something missing? No matter what it is, a soul has to have its own soul. The Great Sage spoke. Since we are fated, I will first bestow the flame soul onto you. The Great Sage chuckled as flames appeared in his hand. In an instant, the hair on Lin Ming's head disappeared. The flame soul was the Samadhi real fire in the Great Sage's hand. The power of the Samadhi real fire was directly bestowed onto Lin Ming's 16 types of the mutated seed of flame. With the bestowing of the Samadhi real fire, the flames in Lin Ming's body seemed to come to life. As Lin Ming had long since fused with the mutated seed of flame, he treated it as a part of his body. The mutated seed of flame at this moment would only benefit Lin Ming. Lin Ming's spirit was suddenly lifted. The mutated seed of flame, bestowed with a soul, had a life. It spun and jumped in Lin Ming's body. Moreover, Lin Ming could clearly feel how shocking and terrifying a battle would be with this kind of lively flame in a fight. Thank you, sir. Lin Ming lowered his head. This point alone had caused Lin Ming's fighting spirit to increase drastically. Since it's all fire, next, I'll teach you the fiery eyes. The great sage continued to speak. As the great sage spoke, Lin Ming's eyes started to burn. Lin Ming's eyes were being burned. This pain caused Lin Ming to groan in pain. Lin Ming didn't even have the chance to cry. Lin Ming's eyes were being burned. In an instant, Lin Ming's eyes were evaporated. At the corner of Lin Ming's eyes, black flames were burning. Not bad, not bad. He actually fused the mutated seed of flame into his body. Seeing that the fiery eye didn't injure Lin Ming, the great sage couldn't help but be surprised. You little brat, no wonder the three of them chose you. You have endured this pain and completely controlled it. The fiery eyes are only a painful process. The great sage said. Now, Lin Ming inherited the great sage's fiery eyes. Although it was painful, it was only a painful process. Lin Ming would not be injured at all. In other words, Lin Ming had the right and ability to accept such an inheritance. Many people were fated to encounter the great sage. However, if you asked them to accept the great sage's inheritance, they would definitely be dead or injured. Even if you arrived at this juncture, you would not be able to grasp it with this opportunity. As time passed, Lin Ming opened his eyes again. Everything before his eyes had changed. The environment around him had changed. However, the great sage remained the same. This was the power of fiery eyes. It could see through everything in the world and see into the essence of a physical object. The fiery eyes did not seem to be of much use. However, after Lin Ming left this place, it would be of great help to Lin Ming no matter what it was. In fact, Lin Ming could even see through the nature of his attacks. Whether it was an illusion or something else, Lin Ming could see through it with his fiery eyes. Tisk tisk, the fusion is completed so quickly. If others see such a powerful object, they think it is worthless. The great sage looked at Lin Ming and smiled. Thank you, great sage. Lin Ming lowered his head once again. Don't keep thanking me. I've already said that we are fated. The great sage waved his hand. This reinforced copper bone, you have to persevere. The great sage said. However, you have already experienced the blood exchange of the diagram spirit. The pain caused by this reinforced copper bone is nothing. The great sage's fiery eyes saw through Lin Ming's body. Come out. The great sage beckoned, and an image of reinforced copper bone appeared. This is Lin Ming looked at the reinforced copper bone. He knew that he had just undergone a blood exchange, and now he was about to undergo another skeletal transformation. Come out. The great sage spoke once more, and Lin Ming felt his body pulled by a frenzied force. Great sage, please wait. Lin Ming spoke loudly, interrupting the great sage from pulling him into the inheritance directly. Why? Are you afraid? The great sage looked at Lin Ming and spoke somewhat disappointedly. However, he could tell that Lin Ming did not seem like someone who would be afraid. I have an idea that I hope the great sage will allow me to carry out. Lin Ming shook his head and said, Tell me about it. The great sage's interest was piqued. He was interested as to what Lin Ming's idea was. I want to carve something on the reinforced steel bone. Lin Ming lowered his head and said, This is reinforced steel bone. Even peak god-tier experts would find it hard to cause any damage to it. And now you're telling me you want to carve something on it. Hearing Lin Ming's words, the great sage frowned. Go on then. Tell me what you want to carve. If I'm interested, I might help you. The great sage looked at Lin Ming and said, A world-class spirit gathering array. Lin Ming said, What? A world-tier spirit gathering array. Are you crazy? Hearing Lin Ming's words, the great sage could not remain calm. A world-class spirit gathering array could only be carved by a god-tier array master. And now Lin Ming was saying that he wanted to carve a world-class spirit gathering array on the reinforced steel. Wasn't this pure nonsense? Great sage, I'm not joking, Lin Ming said. You're able to do it? Well, either way I can't. Even if I wanted to help you, it'll only be emotional support, the great sage said. He wasn't good at such things. If it were combat, he might be able to help. But if it were about a raise, he was clueless about such things. Can you do it? Looking at Lin Ming, the great sage asked curiously. Others might not know, but I do. Of the three of them, only the diagram spirit has some foundation in arrays because he drew heaven and earth. However, even he is unable to draw a world-class spirit gathering array, let alone the demon god and the fire god. As for you, Sai, I'll stop here. Looking at Lin Ming, the great sage stopped mid-sentence, unwilling to cause any harm to his confidence. That being said, your idea is good. If it can be realized, this reinforced steel bone will advance and become a spiritual bone. The great sage said. The benefits of a world-class spirit gathering array were not limited to the gathering of magical elements. Great sage, if you believe me, please let me try, Lin Ming said. Forget it. Even if you can carve the array, there's no way you can carve anything on the reinforced steel bone. The great sage didn't want to say any more. Great sage, please rest assured and leave it to me, Lin Ming said. Out. The heaven and earth brush appeared in Lin Ming's hand. Tisk tisk. I forgot about the heaven and earth brush. Still, you, a tier 10 kid, can draw a world-class spirit gathering array just because you have the heaven and earth brush. Even if he assumed that the diagram spirit could draw the array, however, that would still be an ability that only peak god tier experts had. The current Lin Ming was merely a tier 10 mage. How could he draw a world-class spirit gathering array? Lin Ming did not respond. He simply raised his hand and started to carve on the reinforced steel bone. It's a good thing that the reinforced steel bone can't be damaged by your strength. Speaking of which, you can't do so either. The great sage rested his head on his arms, waiting to see what Lin Ming was up to. Lin Ming held his breath and paid no attention to the great sage. After all, he was the only one who knew whether or not he could carve a world-class spirit gathering array. The ability to carve a world-class spirit gathering array was indeed heaven-defying. It was normal for the great sage to not believe him. As time passed, the great sage's gaze became more and more serious. This brat can't really be able to create a world-class spirit gathering array, right? As Lin Ming continued to carve, the great sage stared without blinking. This was because as Lin Ming continued to carve, even though the great sage was an amateur in the arrays, he could sense that a world-class spirit gathering array was taking shape. This can't be possible. Is it because I'm dreaming? Because I've been asleep for over 100,000 years? The great sage patted himself and said in disbelief. That being said, he was a god-tier expert. He knew very well whether he was dreaming or not. Moreover, the auras of 3 other god-tier inheritances on Lin Ming's body could not be faked. Although you said that, still the great sage was at a loss for words. He just stared blankly at Lin Ming as he continued carving the world-class spirit gathering array. Buzz! As the world-class spirit gathering array slowly took form, the reinforced steel bone began to change. Time passed bit by bit. The world-class spirit gathering array was about to take shape. This kid, he really did draw a world-class spirit gathering array. The great sage rubbed his eyes, dumbfounded. He had never thought that Lin Ming could carve a world-class spirit gathering array. When? As the world-class spirit gathering array was complete, the reinforced steel bone began to tremble wildly, as if it had come alive. At this moment, just like what the great sage had said earlier, the reinforced steel bone advanced to become the spiritual bone. All right, you brat, you have my respect. Although it's hard to believe, I can't deny what I've just witnessed, the great sage couldn't help but laugh. Even though you haven't passed my trial, you already have the right to get my inheritance since you've carved a world-class spirit gathering array, the great sage said. Lin Ming was simply a monster. Even in the era back when god-tiers were everywhere, such monstrous geniuses had never existed. Now this reinforced steel bone has been carved with a world-class spirit gathering array. It has become a spiritual bone. Me back then would have been far inferior to you, the great sage sighed. Logically speaking, no tier 10 mage would be able to withstand his inheritance since an exhale from the great sage would probably crush a normal tier 10 expert. But when it came to Lin Ming, to think he improved something he originally owned. Although the great sage felt indescribably stifled, excitement was more of what he was feeling. Only such a monster could break through the god-tier barrier and resurrect all of them. Handing his inheritance over to Lin Ming would simply be fate's design. Right now, the great sage could not wait to give his inheritance to Lin Ming with both hands. Senior, you flatter me. I was just lucky. Lin Ming hurriedly waved his hand and said. Lucky? My ass, you were just lucky. You've already carved the world-class spirit gathering array, and now you're telling me that it was just luck. The great sage said snappily. The miracle of successfully carving a world-class spirit gathering array was akin to the miracle of an ordinary person saving the world. Even if it was because one was lucky, one would still need the ability to do so. Without sufficient ability, what was the point of being lucky? You brat, you've really broadened my horizons today, the great sage said. I've waited for so long. I didn't wait in vain for the inheritance to be handed over to you. Your achievements in the future are limitless. It's inevitable for you to become a god-tier expert. It's also fated for you to break the god-tier barrier, the great sage continued. Lin Ming had given him a huge surprise today. Thank you for your praise, senior. Lin Ming remained humble with his head lowered. Let's begin. Prepare to fuse the reinforced steel bone, the great sage waved his hand and said. Fusing the spiritual bone will be much more difficult. You should be mentally prepared, the great sage reminded Lin Ming and gave him a warning. Yes, I understand, Lin Ming nodded. To him, pain was something that had always been with him along the way. If he didn't temper himself, he wouldn't be able to grow. To temper himself, pain was simply something that came with the process. Besides, if he succeeded in fusing the reinforced steel bone, his body would probably surpass the peak of the sage realm and be able to reach the half-step god tier. Added by the fact that the reinforced steel bone had already become a spiritual bone thanks to the world-class spirit gathering array carved on it. We're starting, the great sage said. As he said this, a powerful pulling force appeared once more. This time, the pulling force was even stronger. However, Lin Ming's body didn't budge at all. The pain was getting more and more intense. This was because Lin Ming's bones were being separated from his body while his body remained unmoving. Lin Ming's teeth fell off. Without the support of his bones, Lin Ming's body was like a pile of mud. Buzz. At this moment, the mutated seeds of flame that had merged with Lin Ming's body started to burn crazily. Tisk tisk. I'm starting to envy your foundation. The great sage looked at the mutated seeds of flame that had automatically burst into flames in Lin Ming's body and clicked his tongue. However, his path was different from Lin Ming's path. Although he was envious, it was merely a simple feeling. Due to all his bones having been extracted, Lin Ming couldn't even make a sound to show his pain. Go. The great sage moved quickly. After all, the faster the fusion was, the more benefits it would bring to Lin Ming. It would also reduce the time Lin Ming had to suffer. Crack. 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 The reinforced steel bone started to slowly merge into Lin Ming's body. The size of the reinforced steel bone was exactly the same as Lin Ming's figure. Its compatibility with Lin Ming was extremely high as well as if it was naturally Lin Ming's bone. Fuse, the great sage said, and the power in his hands rapidly covered Lin Ming's body. Time passed bit by bit. Finally, the reinforced steel bone fused into one with Lin Ming's body. Lin Ming did not feel any discomfort. It was as if the bone was originally his. As the reinforced steel bone was successfully fused, the surrounding magic elements and various powers crazily swarmed around Lin Ming's body. This was the power of the spiritual bone itself. No discomfort was felt, and Lin Ming's power and physical strength did not grow just by a few times. At this moment, the strength of Lin Ming's physical body was on par with the half-step god tier. We're fated to meet. It's simply an act of fate. To think that your body has such high compatibility with the reinforced steel bone. The reinforced steel bone isn't just a bone. It has many other uses as well. Right now, you can become bigger and smaller at any time. Furthermore, the strength of your body won't change because of your size, the great sage said. Yes. Lin Ming had just fused with the reinforced steel bone. Due to the high compatibility, Lin Ming could clearly feel the various abilities and powers of the reinforced steel bone. Ha! The reinforced steel bone has now found its right master. I don't feel any heartache giving you this. The great sage laughed and said, Great sage, I have a question. May I ask it? Lin Ming looked at the great sage and said solemnly, What question? Feel free to ask anything. The great sage waved his hand. There weren't so many rules in his place. Now, you and the other 3 seniors have given your inheritances to me. By then, when I reach the god tier, Lin Ming deliberately paused for a moment before continuing, and I resurrect all of you with the power I gained, but you've all given me the best things you own. Lin Ming paused again, hesitant to continue. However, where Lin Ming was going was quite clear. I know what you mean. You're trying to say that since we've given you the best things we have, after we've been resurrected, the The great sage imitated Lin Ming's actions and paused for a moment to smile before continuing. Just like how this reinforced steel bone has been fused into your body, you won't be able to return our things to us even if you wanted to, right? Yes, this is the problem I've been thinking about. Lin Ming nodded. If the God-tier seniors were to ask Lin Ming to return these divine artifacts to them, Lin Ming wouldn't mind. After all, Lin Ming believed in himself. When he reached the God-tier, even if he didn't have any divine artifacts, he would still be the strongest. However, some of them, like the God-tier blood, the mutated seeds of flame, and so on, have been fused into his body. To say something like returning them to their original owners was simply unrealistic. After all, they were now already a part of Lin Ming's body. When you reach the God-tier, you'll understand that what's important isn't these things. Your physical body won't be important anymore. After the great sage understood what Lin Ming was worried about, he began to explain. The physical body won't be important anymore? When Lin Ming heard this, he frowned. What if the physical body advanced to the God-tier as well? What's important is the soul. Just like us old fellows. Although we are only a remnant of our souls, we have existed for more than 100,000 years. The power we have now can easily kill a sage, the great sage said. Although they were only a remnant of their souls, their strength was still extremely powerful. In the end, the physical body is only a restriction, the great sage said. When you reach the God-tier, with your foundation, your soul will become even stronger. At that time, these things won't be of much use to you. We are only passing these things to you to build your foundation and help you break the God-tier barrier, the great sage explained, helping Lin Ming understand the details. Do you understand what I mean? The great sage looked at Lin Ming and asked seriously. Yes, I understand. Lin Ming nodded. He had been short-sighted this time. However, it was indeed the case that Lin Ming did not know what the God-tier was like. After all, there is not a single active God-tier expert in this world. The only God-tier expert who had survived was still in a deep sleep. That God-tier expert was about to awaken, but was once again sealed by Lin Ming and the demon god. The great sage spoke again, however. The reason why God-tier artifacts are called God-tier artifacts is that they are useful in battles against God-tier experts. The great sage continued, but then again, the most powerful thing about the God-tier experts is their souls. The rest can be considered mere worldly possessions. The soul was the most important thing to a God-tier. From tier 1 to tier 10, it was the physical body that would undergo change, such as the amount of magic stored in one's body, combat power, etc. Only when one reached the sage realm would one's power undergo a qualitative change. And when one reached the God-tier, the change would be related to the soul. Yes, great sage, I understand. Lin Ming nodded his head once more. Lin Ming was already quite contented that the great sage could explain so much to him. The following inheritances will be more and more painful. You'll have to bear with it, the great sage warned Lin Ming. Seeing Lin Ming nod his head, the great sage did not say any more and started the inheritance process. The inheritance of the great sage did not disappoint. As time passed, Lin Ming accepted all of the inheritance. Bang! As Lin Ming opened his eyes, the energy in his body began to fluctuate. Lin Ming could feel that every single hair on his body contained immense strength. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the skill 72 transformations. As Lin Ming finished accepting the inheritance ended, the system's voice sounded. Does the host wish to raise your proficiency level? The system's voice sounded once more. Yes, Lin Ming nodded and immediately raised his proficiency level to the maximum. 10. Congratulations, the host has reached the maximum proficiency level of the 72 transformations, tier 12. As Lin Ming leveled up, Lin Ming completely grasped the 72 transformations. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the skill, Outer Incarnation. Does the host wish to increase your proficiency level? Just as Lin Ming had raised his proficiency level of the 72 transformations to the maximum, the sound of the system notification appeared once again. Yes, Lin Ming nodded once more. Ding! Congratulations to the host for reaching the highest proficiency level of the Outer Incarnation, tier 12. As Lin Ming pressed the level up button, the Outer Incarnation skill was also advanced to its highest tier. The 72 transformations, try it out. I can give you some pointers while I am still here. The great sage looked at Lin Ming and said, Okay. Lin Ming nodded. Lin Ming asked, Senior, who do you want to see me transform into? The great sage said, Since I am standing right in front of you, you can try transforming into me. All right, Lin Ming nodded. Transform. As soon as Lin Ming said this, his figure started to change. After transforming, Lin Ming was spitting image of the great sage. Even his aura was the same as the great sage's, which included the god tier pressure. Oh my god! This cannot be possible, right? Looking at the transformed Lin Ming before him, the great sage slapped himself out of disbelief. However, he was only a remnant of his soul, so he did not have a corporeal body. Impossible, absolutely impossible. The great sage shook his head in disbelief. He could not believe what he was seeing. Lin Ming had such proficiency on his first try. Great sage, what's the matter? Lin Ming looked at the great sage who was behaving abnormally and could not help but ask, "You brat, have you learned the 72 transformations before?" Looking at Lin Ming, the great sage could not help but ask. No, Lin Ming shook his head. He had only ever learned the 72 transformations from the great sage. It was just that he had maxed out his proficiency level with the system. Oh good lord, you really do have abnormal talent, the great sage could not help but say. Lin Ming's talent was simply monstrous. How is it possible for you to even turn your aura into that of a god tier's? You can't be a god tier powerhouse on the run in this world, right? The great sage was in a daze at this point. Great sage, what are you talking about? Lin Ming hurriedly waved his hand and denied it. When you drew the world-class spirit gathering array just now, I could already tell that you were a monster. And now, you have just learned the skill, yet you. The great sage was at a loss for words. How about this? Try using the outer incarnation next. The great sage sighed helplessly. Okay. I wonder how many outer incarnations would you like to see, great sage? Lin Ming asked. The great sage said, since you just learned the skill, let's make it 3. He did not want to give Lin Ming any hard problems. The number he set was after he had taken into consideration that Lin Ming was a monster. Otherwise, it would be difficult for Lin Ming to create even one outer incarnation. All right. Lin Ming nodded his head and removed 3 of his hairs. Lin Ming exhaled, change. 3 figures appeared in front of Lin Ming. They were the spitting image of Lin Ming. Be it their auras, their movements, or anything, one could not tell that they were merely Lin Ming's outer incarnations. Oh my god! The great sage lost his composure once again. Was this brat really only here to receive his inheritance and not to provoke him? The great sage asked, how much power of yours can these outer incarnations use? 90%, Lin Ming answered truthfully. Oh good lord! The great sage almost couldn't help but vomit blood. Even for himself who was a god tier, the power that his outer incarnation could use was only 80% of his original body. Lin Ming had just learned the skill, yet his outer incarnations could already unleash 90% of his power. With a slight probe, the great sage knew that Lin Ming was not lying. Great sage, what's the matter? Lin Ming looked at the great sage and took a step forward. The great sage waved his hand. You have 4 divine weapons on you now. My ruby golden cudgel is not attractive anymore. After all, it is not even a divine weapon. Furthermore, the ruby golden cudgel is already severely damaged. When you reach the god tier, you can repair the ruby golden cudgel, but now, it is just perfect for you to use as a weapon. The great sage casually waved his hand and a black cudgel appeared in front of Lin Ming. The ruby golden cudgel looked like a black fire stick. However, a powerful force filled this black fire stick. Lin Ming stretched out his hand and grabbed it. Buzz! As soon as Lin Ming held the fire stick in his hand, the cudgel exploded with a powerful force. Boom! The surrounding waves shook the water curtain cave and the loud noise reverberated. Although the ruby golden cudgel didn't give birth to an artifact spirit, it still possessed intelligence. After all, the tier of the ruby golden cudgel was extremely high. Of course, Lin Ming may not find it particularly outstanding given he had quite a few divine artifacts in his hands, but it could be said that with the ruby golden cudgel's tier, it was something that no other Sage Realm experts could possess. Although it wasn't a divine artifact, and couldn't even be considered a pseudo-divine artifact as claimed by the great sage, the combat power and the strength of the ruby golden cudgel was definitely at the tier of a pseudo-divine artifact. Furthermore, if one considered its lethality, no one would have any objections if the ruby golden cudgel were classified as a divine artifact. After all, back then the great sage had wielded the ruby golden cudgel and defeated the heavenly court, which had several divine artifacts. Tusk. It seems like the ruby golden cudgel does like you. The great sage looked at the vibrating and restless ruby golden cudgel and could not help but say, In the future, the Rui golden cudgel is yours and you have to treat it well. Although it doesn't have an artifact spirit, it has consciousness. The great sage walked forward and caressed the Rui golden cudgel as he said, "Great sage, don't worry." Lin Ming nodded, promising to never mistreat the Rui golden cudgel. Lin Ming, although I'm aware that this isn't a dream, you are just too surreal. I've never seen anyone with your comprehension ability or the sort. Though it's true that only a monster like you can break the god tier barrier, but then again, your level of monstrosity is simply surreal. The great sage patted Lin Ming's shoulder and said. Lin Ming's abilities made the great sage feel as if he was in a dream. To think that he could draw a world-class spirit gathering array at tier 10, and now, after just learning 2 of his innate divine abilities, Lin Ming could already use them better than him. Furthermore, the various existences in Lin Ming's body were all extremely powerful who could even be said to be the pinnacle of this world. All right, I have nothing more to say. I'm off to meet my old friends. The great sage stretched lazily and said, "Wait a moment, great sage. There's one more thing that I believe you know." Lin Ming quickly spoke and stopped the great sage who was about to leave. After all, the great sage still had his powers. To help you open up a new element? The great sage turned around and asked. Yes, Lin Ming nodded. You can't keep asking us old fellows to help you open up a path. With your current power, you are entirely capable of opening up a new element yourself. It's just that you have become dependent on us because of the god tier inheritances. Right now, what you need is not for us to open up new elements for you, but to find the path that you have opened up yourself. The great sage spoke. This water curtain cave of mine was created from water magic. You should cultivate here and comprehend the element to create a new element yourself. If you succeed this time, you will be able to succeed for the following elements too. At that time, even if you don't have god tier inheritances to help you, you can still complete this path by relying on yourself. The great sage continued. What he was trying to do now was not to help Lin Ming open up a new element, but instead he was trying to tell Lin Ming the path he should take. Yes, great sage. I understand now. I have been restrained by my thoughts. Lin Ming nodded and said. I'm off then, the great sage said. With this, the great sage's power dissipated and he entered the depths of Lin Ming's consciousness. Everyone, it's been a long time. As soon as the great sage entered, he smiled and said, It has been a long time. The diagram spirit, the god of fire, and the demon god stood up as well. Lin Ming has finished accepting your inheritance in such a short time. The 3 of them asked curiously. Yes, I get the feeling this guy is too monstrous. The great sage nodded. Back then, Lin Ming wasn't that monstrous. After all, I was the first to give him the god tier inheritance. However, as time passed, this kid has become more and more monstrous, the demon god said. In such matters, his words weighed the most since he was the earliest existence that gave Lin Ming the inheritance. Our inheritances should be the reason why he has become more and more monstrous, no. The diagram spirit spoke. That's not it. I can sense that there's something in Lin Ming's body other than our inheritance, and it's an even more powerful existence that is similar to the inheritances. The demon god shook his head and said, There's an even more monstrous existence that's similar to the inheritances. Hearing this, the others frowned. That's right, the demon god nodded. From the first time the demon god met Lin Ming, he was aware that there was an existence similar to an inheritance in Lin Ming's body. The demon god's senses were not wrong. Lin Ming's body did contain an existence similar to an inheritance. And yes, it was an even more powerful and monstrous existence. That was the system within Lin Ming's body. Our inheritances should only be playing a supportive role, though they're also quite useful to Lin Ming. The real reason why Lin Ming is so monstrous is because of that existence within his body, the demon god said. The demon god's words caused them to sink into deep thought. Could it be that Lin Ming is the reincarnation of a god-tier powerhouse that survived? The god of fire frowned and said. This was not the first time he had this thought. Ever since Lin Ming had received his inheritance, he had been thinking of this. After all, Lin Ming did not seem like an ordinary mage. It is possible the diagram spirit who was beside him nodded. He can't be the reincarnation of a god. The few of them who had survived and had created the god-tier barrier would not have allowed such the reincarnation of a god-tier. The demon god shook his head and said, Lin Ming should have had a fortuitous encounter before he met us, the demon god said. After all, when he was just a tier 7, he already had black fire and other powers that other tier 7 couldn't have, the demon god continued. He knew this because he had met Lin Ming when he was in tier 7. I wonder if the inheritance in Lin Ming's body is good or bad? The diagram spirit said. We shouldn't care whether that inheritance is good or bad. We only need to focus on Lin Ming and that will be enough. It's just like how I'm called the demon god, but I'm doing the most righteous thing. It's the same logic. After all, power itself is innocent. The demon god took a deep breath and said, he was called the demon god, but he was a righteous man. His power was of a dark element, but whatever he did was frank and forthright. Power itself was not sinful. The users were the ones who had to be differentiated into good and evil. Right now, there was indeed an unknown power in Lin Ming's body. However, as long as they knew whether Lin Ming was good or evil, it was enough. Furthermore, I can be certain that Lin Ming is someone who values friendship and loyalty. I don't think we have to worry about whether he will resurrect us when he reaches the god tier. The demon god continued. He is a righteous person, so even if he obtains our power, his heart will not change. The demon god approved of Lin Ming very much. That's right. Other than him being a monster, I'm quite satisfied with all of his other aspects. The god of fire spoke up as well. The god of fire had been extremely excited since he met Lin Ming. It was as if he had finally found his successor. The more monstrous Lin Ming's power is, the greater the benefits for us. After all, I've had enough of these dark days, the demon god added. That's true, the god of fire nodded. I didn't open up a new element for him this time. I merely pointed out a path for him, the great sage said at this moment. What you did wasn't wrong. It was just that we yearned for Lin Ming to reach the god tier, which was why we did it for him. That being said, for his own sake, it's best for him to open a path himself. At this moment, the diagram spirit said, I do not doubt that Lin Ming can open a path himself, though it'll probably take longer compared to if we did it for him. The god of fire said. He had 100% trust in Lin Ming. Boom! Suddenly, a loud explosion sounded from within Lin Ming's body. Who said that he would take a long time to open up a new element himself? The great sage couldn't help but laugh. The sound of the explosion in Lin Ming's body was because he had already opened up a new magic element. But, no matter how fast he is, he can't be that fast. The god of fire couldn't help but gape. Lin Ming's speed in opening up a new magic element was even faster than theirs. This made the god of fire feel somewhat incredulous. Either way, the facts are right in front of you. It's not up to you whether to believe it or not, the great sage said from the side. At this moment, Lin Ming opened his eyes and a huge force exploded in his body. Water curtain cave, come. Lin Ming waved his hand and a huge pulling force caused the water curtain cave to rumble. Fuse! Lin Ming intended on fusing the water curtain cave into his body. Most would think that the water curtain cave was made of earth and stone. What everyone didn't know was that the reason why the water curtain cave was called this name was because it was made of water elemental energy. Everyone thought that since the great sage was hot-tempered and had crazy combat abilities, paired with the rumor that the great sage had been born from a crack in a rock, he must be a fire element mage or earth element mage. The truth was that the great sage had water element energy. Right now, the water curtain cave's energy was merging with Lin Ming. A huge amount of water element energy entered Lin Ming's body. The strong power made Lin Ming feel an extreme feeling of being ripped apart. Rumble. In Lin Ming's body, the newly created water magic element let out rumbling sounds as the water element energy entered his body. Tier 2 Water Mage. Tier 3 Water Mage. Tier 4 Water Mage. Tier 5 Water Mage. The tier of Lin Ming's water magic was growing rapidly. In the blink of an eye, Lin Ming's water magic had reached Tier 10. Even though it had reached Tier 10, the water magic in Lin Ming's body was still extremely strong and dense. This was because the magic element storage of the water curtain cave was simply too high. Stop! Lin Ming snorted coldly. As Lin Ming said this, the water magic that was about to break through once more was crazily suppressed by Lin Ming. If not for Lin Ming's crazy suppression, the tier of Lin Ming's water magic might have directly entered the Sage Realm. The Sage Realm was a domain that others yearned for their entire lives but could not step into, but for the current Lin Ming, it was something that he had to avoid. Right now, Lin Ming wanted to suppress the tiers of his magic elements at Tier 10 and walk the path that belonged to himself. No matter how monstrous Lin Ming was, it would be very difficult for him to withstand the combined attacks of several god-tier experts at this stage. Now, he simply had to wait until it was time for him to directly break through to the god tier and unleash all his strength then. Lin Ming had the confidence that when the time came, even if he had just reached the god tier, those veteran god tier experts would not be a match for him. Fuse. Lin Ming spoke again. The water magic elements in the water curtain cave dripped into Lin Ming's blood one drop at a time. This time, just like the thunder magic back then, the water magic was laden with god-tier blood as well. The heart of the world tree was thus nourished by an endless stream of water magic. In such a short time, not only did Lin Ming open up the water magic element, he even broke through to tier 10 in one go. The main point is that he was even suppressing his tier. All this just makes me feel that Lin Ming doesn't seem human at all. Instead, he's a complete monster, the god of fire sighed in amazement. That's right. Before meeting Lin Ming, I never thought that I would meet such a monster, the great sage nodded at this moment. Ever since Lin Ming had carved a world-class spirit-gathering array on the reinforced steel bone, which had turned it into the spiritual bone, and the way he could use the two innate divine abilities, outer incarnation and 72 transformations, he had just learned with much ease and familiarity. The great sage was fully aware that Lin Ming was a complete monster. It's a good thing for us though, the demon god saw things very clearly. That's right. We just have to wait patiently for Lin Ming to break through to the god tier. After I'm resurrected, I'm definitely going to go get those bastards. The god of fire had a fiery temper. After you're resurrected, you won't be their match. When that time comes, we will still have to rely on Lin Ming to make a move. The demon god shook his head. At that time, they would have just been resurrected, while those god-tier existences had endless lifespans, to begin with. In the span of over 100,000 years, they must have become even stronger. They would definitely not be a match for them. At that time, Lin Ming would still be very much needed. Even if Lin Ming had just become a god-tier mage, a monster like him should still be able to crush them. This was because the path that Lin Ming was taking was that of the chaos element. He would be the only chaos element god-tier mage since the beginning of magic, from hundreds of thousands of years ago. From this, one could also tell how difficult this path would be. Oh right, do tell. What are the chances of Lin Ming succeeding to walk the path of the chaos element? The great sage asked. He was also a god-tier existence, so he could understand their thoughts very clearly. However, he was also aware that right now, there was only this one path that could be taken. Up until now, there hasn't been a single person who has successfully walked the path of the chaos element and become a chaos mage, and a god-tier chaos mage at that, the demon god replied. That being said, for hundreds of thousands of years, I have never heard of a monster like Lin Ming either, the demon god continued. That's true. I have indeed never heard of a monster like Lin Ming. The god of fire also spoke. I have to say, when I met a monster like Lin Ming, I thought that it was because I had been asleep for too long that my remnant soul had entered a dream. The great sage spoke at this moment. Ever since Lin Ming had carved the world-class spirit-gathering array, he had felt like he was in a dream. Following that, Lin Ming had been able to use his innate divine abilities just after he inherited them, and this simply made the great sage dumbfounded. If it wasn't for the existence of the few of them, he would have thought that he had entered a dream. Or to put it another way, he had gone mad. It was not only after he saw the demon god and the others that the great sage was sure that he had not entered a dream. After all, anything was possible in dreams, but not this kind of god-tier aura. Now, through communicating with them, the great sage finally knew that it was not a dream when he met Lin Ming. On the contrary, Lin Ming was indeed just too monstrous. Right now, there's only one path Lin Ming can take. Still, he should be able to walk the path, right? The diagram spirit said. He most definitely can. The god of fire smiled and said, yes, he most definitely can. The demon god nodded. Currently, Lin Ming had his eyes closed as the power in his body became stronger. Lin Ming's magic elements were fire, lightning, dark element, and water element. He had 4 magic elements and all 4 were at the peak of tier 10. Of course, this peak of tier 10 was the standard for Lin Ming only. If it was an ordinary cultivator at the peak of tier 10, a drop of Lin Ming's blood could crush them. At this moment, Lin Ming felt a sense of heaviness in his body. One had to know that if Lin Ming's physical body was measured according to tier, it would be at the peak of the sage realm. To think that he was feeling a sense of heaviness. This proved just how strong the magic power in Lin Ming's body was. If this goes on, even if I understand how to fuse the many magic elements with conflicting attributes, I'm afraid that my body won't be able to support so many magic elements. Lin Ming took a deep breath and said, through observing the diagram spirit's descendants and deductions in his heart, Lin Ming had a certain level of control over conflicting attributes. Now that the water element had been opened up, through the method he had deduced in his heart, Lin Ming had made it so that the conflicting attributes would not crash into each other. As such, Lin Ming had a clearer understanding of the conflicting attributes and a plan on how to fuse them. But now, Lin Ming finally understood that if he wanted to complete the fusion of all the magic elements and achieve the chaos element, the most difficult thing was not only the complementing and conflicting attributes, but also the cultivator's inability to bear the burden of so many magic elements. There were just too many magic elements, and the magic power within was simply too thick. The physical body of an ordinary mage would be simply unable to bear it. Lin Ming's physical body was now as strong as the physical body of a peak sage realm, but now, just 4 magic elements were enough to make Lin Ming feel that his body was no longer as light as before. Lin Ming knew for a fact that the future path for the fusion of magic would be littered with problems. The mutual restraint of magic was probably the easiest problem to solve. Now, what Lin Ming needed to solve was the problem of his physical body. If he couldn't solve this problem now, his physical body would probably collapse when he opened up the next magic element. The power of the reinforced steel bone hasn't been activated yet. Lin Ming suddenly thought of this. The reinforced steel bone had only replaced his original bones. Right now, the only merit of the reinforced steel bone was its transformation to the spirit bone, because Lin Ming had carved a world-class spirit gathering array on it. However, the strength of the reinforced steel bone itself had not been activated at all. Based on the records, the reinforced steel bone was extremely powerful. Back then, the great sage had used his physical body to withstand 7 strikes of thunder tribulations. Other than that, regardless of whether it was a giant spirit axe or any other sharp weapon, none were able to cause any damage to the great sage. All this was thanks to the reinforced steel bone the great sage had. Furthermore, at that time, the great sage had stood where he was and allowed the Queen Mother of the West, who was on the same tier as him, to give him 3 sword strikes, yet he never budged. He was even unscathed. This was all because of the strength of the reinforced steel bone. Now, as long as Lin Ming could fully activate the strength of the reinforced steel bone, the pressure of the magic elements in his body would no longer be a problem. However, the great sage had simply given him the reinforced steel bone, he hadn't activated it for him. That being said, from the fact that the great sage had instructed Lin Ming to open up the water magic element by himself, one could tell that the great sage also wanted Lin Ming to activate the reinforced steel bone himself. Lin Ming took a deep breath and tried activating the reinforced steel bone. However, the reinforced steel bones didn't react at all. Instead, Lin Ming's magic elements were all absorbed. Tisk tisk. Looks like it's very difficult to activate the reinforced steel bone, Lin Ming couldn't help but say. This reinforced steel bone was probably also an innate divine ability. If Lin Ming only used magic elements to activate it, it probably would have no effect at all. Lin Ming could only use other methods. He decided to use the method he had always used, which was to put himself in a life-threatening situation to activate his potential. Lin Ming walked to the edges of the waterfall and dived. This was a waterfall that could even destroy Tier 10 berserkers, who had strong physical bodies. To think that Lin Ming chose to resist it directly using his physical body. Now, for Lin Ming, this was the only way to stimulate his potential. And what Lin Ming needed the most now was to stimulate his potential. Rumble. The water collided with Lin Ming's body at high speeds and huge forces, producing thunderous booms. The impact made Lin Ming feel like he would vomit blood. Lin Ming took a deep breath. Even the water mist here had the power to make a Tier 9 powerhouse vomit blood. Lin Ming sat cross-legged on the ground and received the impact. Lin Ming's physical body began to instinctively resist. At this moment, his magic power also began to circulate instinctively. However, Lin Ming forcefully suppressed this instinct. Lin Ming wanted to rely on the strength of his physical body alone to withstand the impact. Whether it was the instinctive resistance of his body or the protection of his magical instincts, Lin Ming didn't need them. As the impact continued, the pressure on Lin Ming's body became greater and greater. This was because the impact of the currents was continuously overlapping. As time passed, Lin Ming could feel that he couldn't even open his eyelids. His breathing became more and more difficult. He didn't even have the strength to allow his teeth to tremble. Time continued to pass and Lin Ming finally collapsed onto the ground. Din! The host's body is under threat. Do you wish to activate the power of the reinforced steel bones? As Lin Ming's body collapsed, a system notification sounded. No. Lin Ming rejected the system's offer. This was also the first time Lin Ming had rejected the system's help. What Lin Ming needed now was for the reinforced steel bones to be activated by himself, and not through the system's activation. Lin Ming could feel that sometimes he relied on the system too much. It was undeniable the help the system had given him, but Lin Ming did not want to rely on the system for everything. Following Lin Ming's rejection, a cold voice sounded in the void. This is the first time someone has rejected the system. The voice was hoarse as it spoke coldly. HMPH, so it's tier 10 mage in a world where the god tier has been blocked. By rejecting the system, I suppose he can't even reach the sage realm. Forget it, such a small ant isn't worth my time, as he observed, the voice harumphed coldly. Erg. Lin Ming didn't even have the strength to roar anymore. This sprat. At this moment, the great sage, who was deep within Lin Ming's consciousness, could sense the danger Lin Ming was in as conveyed to him by the reinforced steel bones. To think he's stimulating the reinforced steel bones' potential like this. I suppose it isn't all born talent that he has been able to achieve such accomplishments. After all, no one can be so ruthless to themselves in cultivation. The great sage sighed. Oh. Lin Ming gathered all his strength and actually stood up under the immense pressure. I will go against the heavens. I will break the god tier barrier. Lin Ming roared. Buzz. Suddenly, waves of light emitted from Lin Ming's body. Lin Ming took another big step forward. He squatted down. I will surpass this world. Lin Ming leaped. The powerful impact that could instantly kill a tier 10 powerhouse was like nothing in front of Lin Ming. Lin Ming's leap seemed to be the sign that the barrier in his body had been broken through. Lin Ming could feel that his body had become more relaxed than ever. Buzz. Lin Ming's body once again made a sound. I am the great sage parallel to the heavens. A muffled sound came from within Lin Ming's body as if it soared into the sky. The reinforced steel bone in Lin Ming's body was like a furious roar. So the reinforced steel bone is spiritual and not physical? Lin Ming smiled. At this moment, he could feel his body had become extremely relaxed. Lin Ming landed on the ground and gently waved his hand. The pressure here was nothing to Lin Ming. If I had accepted the help of the system and lost the spirit, what would have been the power of the reinforced steel bone that I would obtain? Lin Ming closed his eyes and couldn't help but say these words. The reinforced steel bone was such a spirit. If he had given up on this spirit and activated the reinforced steel bone through the system, was the power activated even the power of the reinforced steel bone itself? This kid activated the most fundamental power of the reinforced steel bone with such speed. The great sage couldn't help but gasp. His words caused the remaining 3 god tier experts to surround him. What's most fundamental power? The god of fire asked. The reinforced steel bone. Everyone thinks that the bone is so strong that it can't be broken, because the bone itself has that level of sturdiness. However, such thoughts are all wrong. The most fundamental power of the reinforced steel bone is not its physical sturdiness, but the spirit it contains. If I don't wish to fall, no one can make me fall. As long as one stands, even the heavens and earth cannot make one kneel. The great sage said. To think that Lin Ming has grasped the essence of the reinforced steel bone in such a short time. The great sage said in excitement. Lin Ming himself has this kind of spirit. The demon god smiled and said, he's a perfect match for your reinforced steel bone. The diagram spirit also stepped forward and said, Lin Ming himself had this kind of spirit, and it was a perfect match with the reinforced steel bone of the great sage. What the great sage wanted was the spirit. What Lin Ming wanted was to surpass the heavens and earth. Since the heavens and earth imposed restrictions and barriers on them, then he would fight the restrictions. He would break the barrier. Lin Ming would never admit defeat. The spirit of the reinforced steel bone was as such too. At this moment, Lin Ming could feel that his body was incomparably light. Despite the constant water impact, Lin Ming could soar into the sky. This was something that even a Saint Realm expert couldn't achieve if he relied solely on his physical body. And now Lin Ming had done it. This was all thanks to Lin Ming's spirit and the reinforced steel bone. Lin Ming roared into the sky. He wanted to shout out the injustice in the great sage's heart. Lin Ming stomped down viciously, causing the entire space to tremble. Lin Ming had managed to shatter the void because he was now in the air. It's a success. In the depths of Lin Ming's consciousness, the great sage's voice sounded. What is? The diagram spirit asked. The reinforced steel bone, it's a success. The great sage laughed out loud. Meeting Lin Ming made me feel that my hundreds of thousands of years of patience have not been in vain. Lin Ming is simply the star of hope for us old fellows. The great sage laughed as he said. Lin Ming's appearance was enough to console the pain that they had only been left with a remnant of their souls for hundreds of thousands of years. Lin Ming was their star of hope. A single spark could start a prairie fire. Lin Ming was the fire that could burn the prairie. At this moment, Lin Ming was standing on nothing as he was in the air, and he jumped into the water curtain cave. Pooh! Lin Ming exhaled. When he turned around, the sound of firecrackers exploded within his body. Flame power surrounded his body, evaporating all the water around him. With just a light wave of his hand, a sonic boom rang out. Thus was the terrifying level Lin Ming's physical strength had reached. With one punch, the current Lin Ming could probably beat an intermediate Sage Realm expert to the point of vomiting blood. As for the magic power in Lin Ming's body, it had also reached an extremely terrifying level, to the point it could most likely crush the water curtain cave. Buzz! At this moment, the Rui golden cudgel flew toward Lin Ming. The golden cudgel had an indescribable sense of intimacy towards Lin Ming. Lin Ming smiled and took the golden cudgel in his hand. The compatibility between the golden cudgel and Lin Ming was as if they had fought together for a long time. The pressure that he had felt when he had just jumped into the waterfall was not to be felt at this moment. Lin Ming's body was now as light as an arrow. Let's be off then. Lin Ming looked around and took a step forward. With this, Lin Ming's figure appeared outside the water curtain cave. I wonder how much time has passed since I started accepting the great sage's inheritance. Lin Ming let out a breath and said, Master, the inheritance this time didn't take long. It's just been 5 months. Gandalf appeared and said, 5 months? How can it be so long? From Gandalf's point of view, such a period was not long, but from Lin Ming's point of view, it was a very long time. After all, the demon god's inheritance had only taken a few days. Master, previously Gandalf wanted to explain that this was because the demon god had stopped time when he had passed down his inheritance. The great sage was not such a thoughtful person, thus he did not do something like that. Furthermore, this was a god-tier inheritance. It was normal for it to last for decades or even centuries. Lin Ming was the only one who could finish accepting it in 5 months. And now to think that Lin Ming was complaining that it took too long. There is less than a month left. We need to meet up with Grandmaster. After all, I have no idea how to enter the Battle of Fate, Lin Ming said. The battle for fate does require many people to protect you while you're in it. So yes, right now, it's a good choice to meet up with Grandmaster and Master, Gandalf said. Lin Ming nodded. Lin Ming's current body was so strong it was actually able to shatter the void. In an extremely short time, Lin Ming once again arrived at the very center of Giant City. Seniors, both the Sage Realm experts from the above-ground world and the underworld, had all been staying at the center of Giant City. And now, they had already completed what Lin Ming had asked them to do before he left. The above-ground world and the underworld had once again become one united world. The Sage Realm expert at the center was nowhere to be seen. You're back? The Battle of Fate is beginning soon. In less than a month, following Lin Ming's return, the Sage Realm elf spoke up. That's right. We thought you weren't going to participate in the Battle of Fate. After all, the danger is too great. An underworld sage spoke up as well. How can that be? Lin Ming smiled and said, You've become stronger again. Gandalf stepped forward and said to Lin Ming, Yes, I've obtained another god-tier inheritance. Lin Ming nodded and said, Another god-tier inheritance? In just 5 months? Hearing Lin Ming's words, the Sage Realm experts were all stunned. 5 months is too long, right? It only took me 3 days to obtain Senior Demon God's inheritance. Hearing this question, Lin Ming said without thinking, You. One of the Sage Realm experts hesitated to say whatever he was thinking. Lin Ming was simply killing their confidence. What is it, Senior? Lin Ming asked. The Sage Realm expert thought for a long time before saying, It's nothing. Congratulations. What's your current strength like? You've always suppressed your level at tier 10. We don't know your true strength either, a Sage Realm expert asked. At this moment, Lin Ming's level was still at tier 10, but Lin Ming had received 4 god-tier inheritances. How could his true strength still be at tier 10? It should be about the strength of an advanced Sage Realm, though I'm not too sure either. Lin Ming shook his head and estimated. The power of an advanced Sage Realm. And you have such strength at tier 10. If you reach the Sage Realm, then wouldn't you? A Sage Realm expert stroked his bald head and couldn't help but speak up. It would drive anyone hopping mad if they compared themselves to the monstrous Lin Ming. What the bald sage didn't know was that if Lin Ming were to participate in combat now, even a peak Sage Realm expert would only be able to exchange a few moves with him. If the current Lin Ming were to go all out, no Sage Realm expert would be his match. All right, let's stop the chit-chat. We have to head to the place where the Battle of Fate is taking place, lest we waste more time and miss the Battle of Fate. Gandalf stepped forward and said, "Right, let's go." The group of Sage Realm experts all nodded. The Battle of Fate is extremely dangerous. A Sage Realm expert couldn't help but speak. One had to know that Lin Ming was their hope. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come to Lin Ming's side and followed him. The Battle of Fate was simply too dangerous. Have you ever seen a Tier 10 existence with the power of the Sage Realm? And the power of an advanced Sage Realm at that? Another Sage Realm expert scoffed at this statement. How could Lin Ming lose? He didn't believe that anyone else besides Lin Ming could reach such power. Lin Ming, no matter what, I have the utmost confidence in you. However, you still have to be careful, Gandalf said. Definitely, Lin Ming nodded. Lin Ming didn't need anyone to remind him. He knew how far to go and when to stop. Let's go, Lin Ming said. Gandalf and the others led the way. Originally, Gandalf had wanted to help Lin Ming with his magic power. However, he suddenly realized that Lin Ming was able to match their speed with his own power. Furthermore, it was apparent from Lin Ming's performance that all this was effortless. The other Sage Realm experts noticed this as well. For some reason, they felt extremely excited. Even though they weren't from the same world previously, now that they were by Lin Ming's side, they felt an indescribable sense of pride. Lin Ming was definitely the existence who could break the God tier barrier. In fact, Lin Ming might even be able to reach the tiers above the God tier. After all, since Lin Ming could already possess the power of the Peel Sage Realm when he was merely at Tier 10, he could possess the power that surpassed the God tier when he reached the peak God tier. On Lin Ming, nothing was impossible. Whether it was something imaginable or something unimaginable, Lin Ming could do it. Besides, what Lin Ming was doing now was something they didn't even dare to think of before. Lin Ming's foundation itself made them envious. Lin Ming, this is the place. After a long journey, one of the Sage Realm experts said, "Here?" Lin Ming looked at the stone in front of him. "That's right. This stone is the entrance. However, only Tier 10 experts with sufficient strength can enter." The Sage Realm expert nodded and said, "However, we can be your guardians. After you enter the Battle of Fate, we'll be your guardians to prevent any accidents from happening to you." The Sage Realm expert next to him added, "Can all of you be guardians?" Lin Ming asked. "Yes. However, we can't be of any help in the Battle of Fate." Gandalf nodded and said, "I don't need anyone's help in the Battle of Fate. Moreover, aren't the people who enter the Battle of Fate from the other worlds also Tier 10 experts?" Lin Ming asked. "That's right. No one can change this rule, not even the God tier experts." A Sage Realm expert nodded and said, "Then there's no need to worry." Lin Ming nodded and said, "During this 1 month before the Battle of Fate, you should stabilize your foundation while waiting patiently," Gandalf said. I understand." With this, Lin Ming closed his eyes. As time passed, in the blink of an eye, the Battle of Fate was about to begin. Lin Ming walked forward and placed his palm on the stone. As soon as Lin Ming placed his palm on the stone, it began to vibrate violently and began to emit intense light. Catcha! The stone transformed into a door of light. Without a second thought, Lin Ming stepped into the door. The Sage Realm experts followed Lin Ming into the door of light as well. That's the place. They had been to this place before, of course, only as guardians. They had witnessed how all the Tier 10 experts who entered would immediately die. Thus, this place was gradually forgotten by others. Now, because of Lin Ming's monstrosity, their memories of such a place had been awakened. Here, Lin Ming looked at the orb of light in front of him and entered it. Following this, Lin Ming directly entered another dimension. Although Lin Ming was now in another dimension, his physical body was still in front of the Sage Realm experts. "Welcome to the Battle of Fate." A cold voice appeared. "I hope that you will survive." The voice continued. "The best outcome of entering this place was, in fact, to survive. That being said, those who entered were prepared to die." This place inexplicably, Lin Ming felt a sense of déjà vu in this space. Lin Ming took a deep breath and took a step forward. "Dragon." Lin Ming raised his head only to find a huge black shadow that enveloped him. The dragon in front of him possessed the power of a beginner Sage Realm. One had to know that the highest limit for the cultivators that could enter the Battle of Fate was set at Tier 10. But here, the first creature Lin Ming encountered was a dragon with the power of a beginner sage realm. No wonder all the trial takers from Lin Ming's world had died. Any ordinary tier 10 expert would have been killed upon contact with the dragon. They would have no ability to resist at all. Human, you sure have guts. The dragon looked at Lin Ming and actually started speaking human language. I do like eating tier 10 experts from your world. Although their strength is trash, the taste is still pretty good. I see that your skin is tender and your meat is firm. You must taste better than the others. The dragon looked at Lin Ming as it said coldly. The current Lin Ming was like a cooked meal in the dragon's eyes. After all, he was extremely familiar with the aura of Lin Ming's world. I'll give you 3 seconds to consider. Become my mount or die. Lin Ming looked at the dragon and said coldly, Haha, what kind of joke is this? Hearing Lin Ming's words, the dragon couldn't help but roar with laughter. Free! Lin Ming couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with the dragon. After all, Lin Ming's patience was limited. Anyone else might feel hopeless in the face of a dragon in the beginner sage realm, but to Lin Ming, it wasn't even worth mentioning. Lin Ming could punch through this dragon with one punch. I give you an inch and you want to run a mile, I see. The dragon spoke coldly and attacked Lin Ming without fear of death. Lin Ming raised his head, and the dragon's eyes collided with Lin Ming's. I'm willing to be your mount. In just an instant, the dragon felt a bone-piercing cold. His instincts told him that if he didn't give in, Lin Ming would kill him instantly. He was from the Dragon clan, and he had powerful premonition abilities. On top of that, he was a sage realm of the Dragon clan. Congratulations to Lin Ming from the 39th continent for subduing a sage realm dragon. As Lin Ming subdued the beginner sage realm dragon, the cold voice sounded once more. What? As this voice sounded, the tier 10 experts from the other worlds were all stunned. To think that someone could subdue a sage realm dragon in such a short time. One had to know that some had just arrived at the trial. And now, before they could react, someone had subdued a dragon. The 39th continent? It's been so long since we've heard of this continent. A tier 10 expert lowered his head and frowned as he spoke. The energy fluctuations emanating from this tier 10 expert could be said to be astonishing. And he was an old man with snowy hair. The 39th continent? How could such a monster appear on that trashy continent? Although the people who had entered this trial were all extremely powerful, most of them would still choose to flee if and when they meet a sage realm dragon. There was quite a large number of them who would be unable to escape. Let's go, Lin Ming sat on the dragon expressionlessly. The moment he did so, the dragon couldn't help but stagger. He didn't expect Lin Ming to be so heavy. This made him glad for his wise choice since he was now quite aware that Lin Ming, who was only a tier 10, possessed strength far beyond his imagination.